We're live.
We are.
Mark Lindsay out on the west, Eloy over here in the east. Trampled under. Welcome, one and all.
Welcome, 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 my friends, to the show that never ends.
What's going
Uh,
on, dude?
you name it, it's all going on. I chose this. I chose this display name for a reason. We are surviving off of my cooking this week.
A what?
We're surviving off of my cooking this week, and
Oh,
I am overcooked. No, for the folks out in the chat expecting to see her bouncing in, she may pop in, but she's not here today.
he
She
he's, he
is.
means Linda because
I
you
do
didn't.
mean I do mean my wife Linda. I was getting ready to say, Linda is on day 4, I think it is 3.5, 4 of a 7-day long spinning competition, worldwide spinning competition, where it's just a bunch of people have gotten together from all over the world, and they sit down at their spinning wheels, or they use their hand spindles, or they use their electric spinners, and they start spinning noon last Saturday, and they will spin until noon this Saturday. And they go for who spins the most yardage. They go by most yardage as a team, then most yardage as an individual, using the various different types of spinning equipment. Now, last year, Linda's team took first place.
Awesome.
The year before, they took second place
Worldwide.
worldwide. Last year, Linda came in fourth worldwide, and she spun a little over 18,600 yards of yarn out of fiber, out of just wool. This year, she's attempting to break 20,000. And what she's doing is, I kid you not, she is serious. She has dedicated this week to this. She gets up at 6 in the morning, which is unheard of. And she starts spinning at 7 a.m. She'll break, for nature calls, and she'll take a break for lunch. Then she takes a break at dinner. Then she spins up until 10 o'clock at night. Takes pictures of her progress, goes over to her team's Facebook page, posts her progress on it, and then gets up the next morning and does the same thing. And this is going to go on until noon next Saturday. So that's where she is. So she's not going to be in the chat. She may pop in, she may take a break and decide to pop in, but I seriously doubt it, because she's out there, got that treadle almost smoking, man.
So there's no village
Mm-hmm.
in some remote town
Mm-hmm.
that has 1,000-year tradition of spinning with the crudest of implements next to some sort of trickling
Yes,
spring that her group did not overcome that last year.
yes, her team of the teams that entered, and they have like 10 people per team,
There's
and it's all over. I mean, they're competing against people in Australia, New Zealand, the UK, Germany, France. I think the most oddball was they had somebody in, and it's not even oddball, but it's not where you would think would be a hotbed of this kind of thing, was India. But they're all over Europe, Scandinavia, a few in Asia and Australasia. But yeah, she's having the time of her life. Now,
wow.
Jim is asking, can't you program a CNC to spin all that? Yeah, that's how your clothes are made. But this is for what they consider hand spun, meaning somebody has hands on the fiber and is actually controlling whatever is putting the twist into it. They can use a drop spindle, which is, depending upon what culture it is, could be anything from a rock on a stick to a long staff with like a little flywheel, and they hand spin that way. Or like Linda, she has a spinning wheel. Or they allow electric spinners, which is basically the business end, the bobbin end, and the flyer end, but it's run by an electric motor, run off a foot pedal like a sewing machine. And they do allow those as well. So,
Crazy.
but they have a different category for each of those three. And it's been going on. She's entered, I want to say, for the last 4 years. So
Wow, dude,
it's
worldwide.
yeah, and she has a ball with it. They get in, they talk smack to one another, all the different teams and team members and teammates and this that. They just, I mean, this is serious stuff, and they there are prizes to be won for all this. I mean, they put up decent prizes. They have companies that donate prizes and what have you, and you know she's just having a good old time with it.
Well, good.
So I know where her and my money are. So let's see. Jim says, my daughter got into weaving for a short time. She had a small loom. Linda has a small loom and two big ones. We haven't had a dining room table since 2006. So, because we have an 8 harness floor loom. Okay. Jamie's saying, is there an independent inspector to check everyone's work to make sure everyone did a good job? It's all done online, and you photos and video and things of that nature. It's kind of a combination between that and the honor system. But no, it's not like she has to mail it in or anything. But she does take video and take photos of her progress every day. And that's how they keep track of it.
Wow.
So, but yeah, it's pretty cool. I mean, she's having fun with it. So I'm her cheerleader. So
Well, I mean, a lot of people don't think of. I mean, I don't particularly think of things like that, but those are the. I mean, bedrocks of even progressing in history because without freaking clothes,
yeah, that's why with your crew, if you're when you're putting together your survival crew, you need somebody that can make you clothes because you're always going to need clothes.
this talking about your crew and back to I love Norseman the series.
Hmm.
Like I watch it every now and then. I'll return to it because I just
Hmm.
enjoy the whole series. And I love the because they have the Vikings,
Hmm.
then they have the farmers,
Yeah.
like that make the produce the food, and then
Hmm.
they have the subhumans, which are the slaves.
Hmm.
And there's this one part of the in the series where the farmers rebel
Uh-huh.
and they say, no, we're going up, we're many, we're going up against them so that we can have the goodies. And they attack the Vikings, but they don't have any sharp weapons. Because they don't know, so all their weapons had blunt, and they're being plummeted, and but at the end of the day, that nobody gets hurt and stuff. And then so they get all beat up, and so what happens is that then the farmers they decide some other thing, and he says we like the lead farmer in
Hmm.
the village. He's like, we are human beings, blah blah blah, and we are gonna go and take our rights because we should have equal rights because we're human beings and this and that. And as he's getting off of his little scaffolding thing, and he sees the subhumans there, he says, except you people. This does not apply to you. You people are subhumans. Remember that.
Yeah.
And you see them sitting there like with all the dirt and grime, just looking at him and stuff. Like
Mhm.
I every time I see those little scenes, because there's a lot of that kind of little
Yeah.
twist of comedy. I just crack up, dude.
Well, that's what attracted me to it was the fact that you're talking about a Viking village, but there are so many 20th and 21st century topics that keep coming up.
Yeah,
It's flippin' hilarious how
it's
they
hilarious.
interweave stuff like that in there. but it's still the Vikings, and even just little small stuff. You remember when the chieftain of the village died, and they kind of they put him on his raft, and they kind of kick it out there, and they've got to shoot a flaming arrow into it so that the his death boat will burn and he'll ascend to Valhalla.
Yeah.
And the one guy shoots like 3 arrows, and each one of them misses. And one of the other guys, who's a much better marksman, is like, "No, give me that. He's not going to make it to Valhalla. Give me that." And like, no, he was my dad. You know, well, no, he was my. I was his favorite. No, well, he was my dad. No, give me
Yeah.
that. And the boat's going further and further and further away, and finally, he can't reach it anymore. He
Hmm.
said, "Well, now he's never going to ascend to
And
Valhalla."
they're all, and you see their faces. They're all
Mhm.
like, oh, and it's so great, dude.
But everybody who has a brother or sister has had that argument. Give it to me. It's my turn. No, he was my dad too. No, it's it's the same stuff. It doesn't matter what century it is.
Yeah,
God,
my
that was a
favorite
funny
thing too
series.
is that they capture a Roman guy,
Mhm.
something or other from Rome, something of Rome. His name is.
I can't remember his name.
Yeah, like some name and then of Rome,
Mhm.
and that was his last name of Rome, because that's
Mhm.
how it was. And at one time they do a little this and that in order to gain advantage. So he teams up with that one same Viking, and he becomes the wise man of the
Yeah,
thing.
he was an artist.
Yeah, because he was an artist. Well, there's a cap that the wise man's supposed to wear,
Mhm.
and they take the cap off of the dead wise man and they put it on Mr. Rome's head.
Mhm.
He's like, and they ask him for a speech because he's now the leader of the thing, or of the intellect, or the lawgiver, or the law
Mhm.
something. And he says, "My first decree is that the lawgiver will not have to wear this hat." And he throws it away.
Yeah,
It's so hilarious.
yeah. There's some good stuff in it. It's on Netflix, right?
Hmm.
It's called Norseman.
Yeah,
Not Vikings. There's another one called the Vikings, but this is Norseman. It's flippin' hilarious. I
it's the
love it. It's
best.
a great show. That's one of the things that you turned me on to that. And that's you're 2 for 1 because I didn't like Idiocracy, but you turned me on to Norseman. That made up for it. You
Yeah.
finally convinced me to give The Truman Show a try. That was a good movie. So you're 2 for 1. So
Well, Idiocracy is good in terms of the concept. I guess the
yeah,
execution was.
yeah, the execution left a lot to be desired, but yeah, it was there. It could have been good, but it just kind of
The idea that a regular guy. Go ahead.
no, go for it. You just reminded me of something, and I'll keep it.
No,
Go
no,
ahead.
no. Say it. Say it.
No, go for it. Continue your thought because I don't want to interrupt that. So,
Just that the idea of a regular average guy
mhm.
sent to the future, and then everybody's an idiot. And even though he in his era was just like the most average guy, is now literally the most brilliant guy on earth. That whole concept
Mhm.
to me is freaking hilarious. And he
Yeah.
even sounded effeminate to them
Mhm.
because he actually was thoughtful in his speech.
Yeah.
And to them, it's like, and so all those little concepts that come together in that,
Mhm.
I, it's almost like you don't even have to go to the future to say that. You can
Nope.
see it online.
Yeah.
That a lot of people, the level of discourse and conversation and thoughtfulness
Yeah.
is a lot to left to be desired in terms of, yeah, that. So I like that because of the irony of it. We don't really have to go to the future for that.
No, and that's the problem. Movies like that are not instruction manuals. You know,
You would
you,
hope.
yeah, just they're not saying, hey, yeah, you need to do this. They're saying this is what happens when you dumb people down. It wasn't telling you to dumb people down, so stop it.
Yeah, there's a culture
Mhm.
of that currently,
Oh yeah.
but I don't know if it's an issue with, maybe it's an issue with many things, but I don't know that it appears that there's a culture of promoting uneducated, and by educated I mean just roundabout balanced
Well,
in some knowledge of general. Not everybody knows everything about everything or a little bit
no.
about everything necessarily, but there's a little spectrum palette of things that should be grabbed,
Hmm.
easy grabs, that people can generally, like geography, stuff like that. Just geography, for instance. Where's Europe? A lot of people don't freaking know where the hell Europe is, dude.
Most folks don't care,
No, I.
because
But
the,
but the chicken come before the egg on that.
I think it's probably 50-50. I really do. I think it's probably
Well,
fifty
what
fifty.
I mean is that if did they is it that they don't is the fact that they don't care because they weren't taught it and none the wiser? Is it that they know they can learn it, but they say no? I don't need to know where Europe. If it's I, so, what I'm
Well,
saying is that that kind of thing.
again, I think it's about 50-50. I think a good percentage of them just don't care whether they were taught it or not. I think a good percentage of them just weren't taught it. But I, with what's going on, I think, not having spent any time in a classroom in, God, 40 years, I can't really comment on what's being taught now because I just don't know, you know, but, and you can't force somebody to learn something. So that's right out the window. You can sit there and tell me all kinds of stuff, but if I'm not interested in it, it's going right straight out the other ear. I'm not going to remember it. I might remember it long enough to pass your test, but after that, it's flushed, you know.
At the level of the
But,
individual, you can say this.
well, yeah, that's what I'm getting at. But again, classrooms are made up of the individuals. So whether they were taught it or not, if they don't want to retain it, they're not going to.
No, but there's a problem somewhere in there. At the cultural level, we can't really say
No.
because it's too many people to account for.
Mhm.
But at the cultural level, there's an implication that's always on display of promoting simplicity in terms of any number of things, subjects. There's no further investigation or thoughtfulness over any number of things. If you look at popular culture, all it is, in a sense, is everything is an overview, simplistic
Mm-hmm.
A or B scenario. And so at the individual level, we wouldn't know unless we, interact with said person and this and that. But at the cultural level, in the broad view of it, as far as what we see or what I see, and it's not unheard of, I think that we could all generally agree that there's a notion that, oh, well, people are dumb and this and that, like that concept.
Mm-hmm.
And we see little repetitions of this in popular culture, in the media. There's always this thing, like they ate Tide Pods because they thought that was cool or
Well,
stuff like that.
it's because that's entertainment for 2 minutes for a huge number of people. People like to feel superior to anybody. So when you see something that you would consider foolish or stupid, you're going to highlight it. I mean, YouTube's full of them. You know, the guy that falls off his bicycle, or the guy that turns around and walks right into a street sign, or something like that. YouTube's full of them. So that satisfies that quick dopamine hit of feeling superior. I would never do that. Never mind the fact that you did it yesterday. You know.
Yeah. Well,
So, but people like to feel superior to somebody else. You know.
there's a lot of videos being pumped out on YouTube on a minute by minute,
Oh
second by
yeah.
second basis.
Mhm.
And you could also look at the popular videos, and it always points in the direction of just, nonsensical. Not that one has to be thoroughly invested in any sort of theme or topic or this or that, but it appears
Mhm.
that the simplistic, the basic, and such
Mhm.
is what's pushed. And if you listen to music of nowadays, and
Mhm.
although there's always been, but that's one of the reasons I dislike pop music of today. It's because of the shallowness, which I think is connected to that stupidness, let's call it that. If you look at the 60s songs, there was a lot of pop bubblegum, like we've said
Oh
before,
yeah.
but there's a lot of deep reflective things compacted into a 2.5 minute song.
There can be,
Well, there
but
was.
there's also a lot of shallowness too.
Hmm.
But you know.
But here's the difference. Back then, the deeper stuff, like with a deeper concept or a good story that clicks together,
Mhm.
like good layup, could be on the top 10 and
Oh
work.
yeah.
Whereas today, it seems like everything. Ooh, my booty big, big, big. My booty big, 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 big. My booty big, 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 big. And then people are,
All
and then
right, stop it. We're gonna get a copyright strike because you know somebody wrote that song. Go ahead.
well, no, but see, that's the thing. So, in terms of that, like if you look at the back then, there was reflectiveness, and I walked into that dime bar and got myself a drink because my old lady and this and that going down to Oklahoma.
Yeah, but you got to remember, we also had "I'm Too Sexy for My Shirt." So sexy it hurts. So, wow,
But
do we
that's
really
not.
have room to talk?
We absolutely do have room to talk because of what I mentioned. That yes, that's true because
Mhm.
there's all sorts of things, but both things made it to the popular tops.
Mhm.
But you don't have this reflect. So the culture. What I'm getting at is that it seems that introspection and these deeper questions and such and this and that is less. It
Mhm.
seems that way.
Well, I think it's easy for us to say that than it would be from somebody growing up now in the current generation, because every generation thinks that their music is the best, you know, with a few exceptions. But just about every generation thinks that the music they're growing up with is the best. And I think there's arguments on both sides that could be made, but I'm with you on about 99.999 recurring on that thought. But I think it has also a lot more to do with the way things are produced these days. I'm just talking to kids and grandkids. That's the only younger people that I really, and nieces and nephews that I really interact with. I'm an old man. Nobody wants to hang around with this old dude, and I don't want to be hanging around with them, to be honest with you. But my family is completely different. And they just don't feel that emotional connection to music today that you and I felt back in the day. And we can speculate on it, but they don't even get the idea of us. Who's your favorite group? And they'll say, okay, it's this singer or this performer or whoever. Say, okay, imagine sitting with your friends in your living room or your bedroom or something and playing a full album, about 45 minutes of nothing but them. They can't fathom that. It's like, no, we got to change it up. We've got to go jump over here to this guy and then that guy and then the other guy.
Yeah.
You watch them at concerts and every damn one of them's got their phone up. It's like, can't you live in the now? You know, okay, I get it. You want to show your friends you're at this concert, but for the entire concert, live in the now and enjoy what you got. They just don't feel that emotional attachment, that emotional connection that you and I felt when we went to, you know, ZZ Top concert or Pink Floyd or whoever. Pick a band that you saw live.
Ruffy Ruff Rap Extravaganza '93,
Well, different strokes for different folks, and I'm all for it.
and the big booty dancers.
So,
Um, but remember and so yeah, it's going to be different in that respect. But remember my premise. I added the music as an example
right.
because it contrasted deep themes that made it to the charts back then,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to now. Not dude, the music is just the
Mm-hmm. It's the
carrier
vehicle.
for the
Yeah.
idea that I was trying to get across.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I want to say that it's a difficult question, as you said,
Mm-hmm.
because it is. But we have a lot of problems to be able to analyze because we're older
Mm-hmm.
than we were when we were younger.
Well, obviously, yeah.
So we've gained knowledge through sheer that. But
Longevity, yeah.
so we've gained knowledge just through, so due to that, it can also cloud our judgment in terms of what
Oh
this
yeah.
question is, because what's obvious to one person
Mm-hmm.
at one age, that same person at another age wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
it might that same thing might not have been obvious. But all that to the side, at the population level, cultural level, what's put out there, it doesn't seem like it encourages an informed society, but then again, maybe it
No,
never
it
did.
doesn't. It never did. Never did. And that's a whole nother subject that we could off into. But basically, I think George Carlin said it best. Everything is set up to produce good workers. Just that's it. Everything is set up to produce good workers. And we'll tell you a few things. We're not going to tell you everything. We can't tell you everything. There's not enough hours in a day. But we're going to pick and choose what we think you might need to know or that we think we want you to know to keep you coming back and watching the commercials for our stuffing mix that doesn't have to be baked inside the turkey and this branded toilet paper. And we'll tell you not only what the big story is, we will imply how you're supposed to feel about that just in our tonation, just in the video we choose to play versus what we don't choose to show, will imply the way you're supposed to feel about that story. Then we'll move on to traffic and weather at the top of the hour. You know,
Yeah.
so it's not there to create an informed public. I don't remember who said it, but um, it was a good quote, and it's an apt quote. People are intelligent. People are smart. The public is stupid. So I don't know how you can come to that conclusion when you figure out the public is made up of people But it's kind of like this phenomenon where the more people who are standing around and witness something, the less likely anybody is to actually help. If you see some guy fall off his bike and you're by yourself, the odds are more likely that you're going to see if the guy's okay. But if there's 15 or 20 people standing around waiting for the bus, somebody falls off their bike, the odds are greater that somebody's going to start laughing and nobody's going to go see if he's okay.
Or everybody thinks somebody else will do it, so they leave them
Right,
alone.
right. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of people afraid to take charge. There's a lot of people who are afraid of what this person's reaction is going to be. They don't want to draw attention to themselves. I can't get involved.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. There's
So,
something to that whole thing where we're interconnected anyhow,
mhm,
because we're kind of like a little a big ant colony,
mhm,
and we take cues from everything around us as well.
mhm.
That occurs with everybody because we can't help it. I
Sure.
mean, it is what it is. It's this idea, or it's this concept of us being able to self-reflect, unlike apparently, as far as we know, all other creatures on Earth, at least to the degree that we do. That
Well,
makes the situation complicated.
it does. It's very complicated because as far as we know, we're the only species that has a conscience. We know when we're doing something right. We know when we're doing something wrong. And so we have this awareness of what's going on around us, but we still choose whether we're going to take action or not.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah. It's an interesting thing, dude. It's an interesting thing. The whole thing is a crazy thing that we're sharing ideas. You and I and all of us here. And if you think of what it is, as far as we can manage it, we're sitting on this Earth out in space in a thing that's the universe with an unknown, unending expanse, and we're contemplating things. Um, and we're contemplating things as opposed to just reacting to the environment without that, like apparently other beings or creatures
mhm,
do. We have that added ingredient.
right. That's what I mean. We have a consciousness that allows us to speculate, allows us to fantasize, allows us to wonder and be inquisitive. There are a bunch of other species that are inquisitive, but that's more on a instinctual level. If something's out of the ordinary, certain species are going to avoid it because they're afraid of it. They don't know, is this a threat? Other species are going to go investigate it because they're curious. I remember there was a photographer. He's been all over the world. Do you remember a few years ago there was a picture it became viral all over the place. Um, this photographer, he left his camera out. He was watching a bunch of monkeys, a bunch of gibbons, and he set his camera down and he walked away from it. And this gibbon walked up to it, picked it up, turned around and looked at it, and basically took a selfie. He's looking right into the camera and clicked the button and it took a picture. Well, the noise scared it and it dropped the camera and ran away. And he went back and he developed it. And it's the perfect monkey selfie.
Mhm.
Some creatures are just curious about things like that. There was another time where he was out he was in Africa somewhere, I want to say out in the Serengeti. Maybe I'm wrong, but he was out there filming a bunch of meerkats. And then suddenly he felt something plop onto his leg, and he turned around and he looked, and there's like 8 meerkats behind him, walking up to him, checking him out. What are you doing? And it's just their natural curiosity. And one of them hopped up on his leg and was standing there looking. What are you looking at, dude? Oh, I know that. I see my house from here. Hey, Charlie, what's up? That kind of thing. And next thing he knows, he's sitting there. These meerkats are just gathered all around him while he's watching 5 of them out in the distance with a big lens on his camera and stuff like that. And there's another videographer with him shooting footage of all this. And then soon he's panning around. They're gathered all around him too. They're all looking at these guys like, what's going on?
Yeah,
but other species would just take off running because it's something out of the ordinary. They don't know, are they going to be threatened by it? So
yeah, I'm just saying that from that
mm-hmm.
to us sitting here
mm-hmm.
with a computer
mm-hmm.
that was made by people, and we're people too, and there's a screen, and we're inside built things that
mm-hmm.
house people and other things that people create, interconnected with a system of money and religion and other disciplines and all these things. It's a far stretch where we're
right
at. And
well, not only that, but we have the ability to communicate those thoughts and ideas to one another and debate them or discuss them or explore them together or go our separate ways and explore separate things. We still have that free will to decide what we're going to do. But we have that more sophisticated thought process that allows us to do that kind of thing.
it's mind-blowing stuff. I mean, I'll ask you this. How many people do you think, you're not going to know this, but I'm just saying from your thoughts, in your opinion, reflect on the fact that they can reflect? How many people,
Oh, man.
I'll just say it again for clarity. How many human beings
That's tough.
do you think reflect on the fact that they reflect?
I don't know that that's even quantifiable. Because, I mean,
how many people sit there and say, you know what, myself? I'm thinking.
I'm sure most of us have had thoughts along those lines. I mean, and a lot of that is taught. I mean, you can find books on meditation. You can find courses on meditation. You can find groups that are trying to promote self-awareness, things of that nature. The biggest,
and they're popular.
Very popular. At least back when there were still bookstores. The biggest section in the bookstore, if you look at it,
self-help,
was the self-help section. Absolutely. And that includes the physical as well as the mental and personality, things like that. And you had guys like Tony Robbins and guys like Richard Simmons who had a million books out, and people bought them. I think people are self-aware to the point that they think they might need maybe a little guidance or a little bit of support or a little bit of improvement or even just confirmation. So I think there is quite a bit of self-reflection going on out there. It's just where you choose to go with that self-reflection and what direction you decide that reflection is telling you to go.
Yeah.
You know,
that sounds about right.
I mean, look at Charles Manson and the White Album. You know, that ain't what the Beatles meant when they said, why don't we do it in the road? All right.
Yeah.
But that was his self-reflection, and a lot of drugs that made him decide to go in that direction. Oh, that's what they mean. Helter skelter. Here we go.
Um. So yeah, that's the thing about humans. They self-reflect,
Now,
and it's ubiquitous, apparently.
yeah, I mean, and it can be just, it could be as deep as something like that on a philosophical level or on a psychological level. You know, I've got to improve my mental state so I'm more positive about it. It can be something as deep as that, or it can be something as superficial as I hate my hair. But
Yeah.
either way, it's self reflection. You know,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's more to the point. I think what's more important than self reflection is being able to step back a little bit and examine that reflection. Because if you, I don't care who you are, if you convince yourself that your hair sucks and your teeth are crooked, whether they are or not, in your opinion they are, that's where you're going to put your emphasis, is on the superficial, you know.
Which is
And some
important
people
too.
just go off the deep end over it, though, is the point.
The superficial is important too.
I mean, sure. I mean, not me now because I'm in a very strong, healthy relationship. But in our younger days, we were always out there peacocking. We didn't have the neat feather display to set out to attract the ladies, but we had other things that we did to be presentable in a hope to turn some girl's head. I mean, that was half of our life. The other half was music and movies and cars and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
you know, um, men genuinely, most men, I won't say all men because some guys are gearheads. They like cars, they like hot rods. Most guys don't really care. They don't care about having a nice car. They know women like nice cars, so they'll get a nice car. They don't care if they live in a one room apartment. They know women like nice houses, so they want to rent nice houses or nice apartments. About three-quarters of the stuff men do in that age group is for women. So, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, the concept of the self-reflection and the dumbed downness
Mhm.
of society, or encouraging, plus that George Carlin thing that you said, um, and that society never encouraged it necessarily. As far as
Mhm.
questioning things
Mhm.
and whatnot. I think that that's it sounds about right, as
Mhm.
far as I know, that it's a thing that's always been.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure it has. You know, people have always wanted to look better than the next guy or be smarter than the next guy and wanted to prove it or be stronger. I mean, look at all the competitions we have. You know, sports all basically came from survival. There was an element um, of survival to most of it until relatively recently when it became a game. But there's still that competitive element in there to prove that I'm better than the next guy.
I bet you're better at going into the Coliseum and fighting two tigers and an elephant than I am.
I bet you're wrong. Number one, you're bigger than me, you're younger than me, you're damn sure going to be quicker than me because I'm one of the itty bitty short fat guys.
Tuck and roll, tuck and roll.
Yeah, well, you don't want to do that when the lions are chasing. You ever seen a cat with a ball? You don't want to even look like one.
There's some competitions you don't want to be good at. Let's put it that way.
There was some guy. God, I don't remember who it was. I don't know if you remember. He 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 wanted to test the theory, and he had a friend that worked at the zoo. I want to say it was a San Diego zoo, but I could be wrong. He got a hold of some refrigerator boxes, and he got one of the zoo officials to put a refrigerator box in the lion enclosure, and another one in the tiger enclosure, and another one in with leopards. Because he wanted to see, is the appeal of a box universal among all cat species? And every damn one of them, one of the big cats went over and climbed into the box and laid there like he owned the joint. Every ding dong one of them. It was it may or may not mean anything, but it's there. And it's like, okay, yeah, it's legit. You got an open box, a cat's going to climb in it. Oh well.
The whole concept like that we originally started off with.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it was just a roundabout thing where I questioned how many people or what would the percentage be of. I think that that's kind of answered. My question was answered in the most possible way, and the answer being that most people do at one degree or the other, be it
Yeah.
how's my hair look, all the way to just what you said.
Mm-hmm.
I think that that's fair and reasonable as far as what we see and know. And that the idea that I started with,
Dumbing down and how the
the
average
dumbing down,
person.
yeah, there is an
Well,
appearance, from my observations, of an attempt from the media to make it all simple. But the idea that it's always been that way, I think that that's true. I guess it's done now through different means of according to technology. And I don't know that it's a conscious thing like a big bad plot. It just is because it's the easiest path of least resistance in terms of
yeah,
here's the information you need to know, and we kind of might prefer it or whatever.
but
And
but
every
in this day and age, just about everybody knows that if they're really interested in finding out, they can go to other places
yeah,
and dig deeper.
yeah,
So it's getting, I don't know, in some ways it's getting harder to do that. It's getting harder to lead people by the nose, but in a lot of ways it's getting easier to lead people by the nose because people are more willing to go along with the crowd. And that's been universal. People are more likely to go along with the crowd than they are to branch off on their own. There's always going to be some outliers who say no. But,
yeah. I
if it's all of a sudden cool for us to turn our baseball cap sideways so that the bill is neither here nor back there, but out to the side, you're going to get a few people that'll follow along with that. And more people see it. And pretty soon, everybody's wearing their hat with the bill pointed to the side. And the left side's going to mean one thing, and the right side's going to mean another thing. And then pretty soon, every direction is going to be associated with something, and nobody's going to be wearing hats at all.
or they'll just wear so many it'll eventually become a sombrero.
Yeah, well, there's that. There's that. Bring
I
back
mean,
the fedora.
I'm wearing this shirt,
Mm-hmm.
mystery machine,
Mm-hmm.
Scooby Doo.
Yep.
I'm wearing it,
Mm-hmm.
but I might as well if people were wearing ruffled frickin' garments,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what I'd be wearing. So it's not that
Yeah.
I chose this because it's what's available,
Mm-hmm.
and I
It
may
was
have
on
liked.
top in the drawer. Okay, it's time for this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I may have purchased it because I like Scooby Doo, which is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
But it's what's available. But if
Mm-hmm.
that were to change up, whatever,
Yeah. Would you walk around wearing a T-shirt that had William Shakespeare on it?
not really.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you walked past a lot of different designs when you found that one and said, "Yeah, that's the one I want."
Well, I bought
So,
it because of the price. Honestly, it's kind of like what you said about
mm-hmm.
guys, and it's not. It shouldn't be the case.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm saying that's a choice. The people at least looked like they dressed way better back in the day.
In some ways, yes, they did, and in other ways, I've said it before and I'll say it a million times. The dumbest thing about growing up in the '70s was the way we dressed. with the real wide collar lapels, and the polyester everything, and the 42 chains around your neck and platform shoes and stuff like that. I was never that way. I was more the jeans and t-shirt kind of guy because that just looked like a lot of money and a lot of work to me. A lot of money I didn't have and more work that I wanted to put into my appearance. I didn't want to be that guy that spent a half an hour in the bathroom getting ready to go to school. I wanted to be the guy that got out of the shower, got dressed, and was out the door. You know. So I ain't got time for that junk.
There's a video where it's all about, and I just ran across it randomly, where they're interviewing Brad Pitt,
Mm-hmm.
and what's your morning routine? It says, oh, it's simple. And then he proceeded to, and then I put this mask thing on, and then I peered. Like he went through all this whole thing. It's no big deal. I'm out the door, and I'm like, boy, I don't do any of those steps.
Yeah, if it's more than 2 steps, it's not simple. All right, come on.
I soak my face,
The,
splash water, and dry it.
do you still eat Pop Tarts?
Mm-mm.
Don't. Okay. Occasionally, I'll grab a tart, and
Now wait a second. I
I
will
was
grab a tart. Go
well.
ahead.
I was going to ask, do you put them in the toaster? Or you just open up the envelope and eat them.
I wasn't talking about that tart, but go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was my next question for you. Did you, when you did have the Pop Tarts, did you actually put them in the toaster and heat them up, or did you
Mm,
just open the package and start chowing away?
most of the time, yeah.
That's what I did as well. Because my attitude was, if it's more than 2 steps, you might as well cook. You know, so you kind of eliminate the convenience. And not to say there's anything wrong with a hot Pop Tart. It's just it was a lot of bother, and I just ain't got time for that. Give me my tarts. I got a bicycle to ride.
The plastic wrapper was even
Yeah.
a thought. Why do I even have to open it? I'll just shove the damn thing.
Well,
No,
it was
but
it
yeah,
was the Mylar wrapper in the cardboard box. It's like, why do we need the box? Well, to know if you're getting strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon. Hey, surprise me.
yeah. Well, because I think it's just a guy thing, dude.
It is.
I think
It
it's just,
is.
well, not all guys, because there's guys that probably will, and then they'll take a fork and knife, and they'll sit with the paper, and then they'll put their nappy
No,
on their
that's
in their thing, and then they'll sit
none of the guys I know do that.
and they'll cross their legs, and they'll scoot forward in the kitchen table with classic music playing on the thing.
the
Well,
guys the guys I knew, the guys that I hung around with, maybe they would take a rag and wipe the grease off their fingers before they grabbed it. Maybe. But
well,
usually it was just run in and grab the sucker and just bring the whole Mylar envelope out, into the garage with you, slamming the garage door, pop it open. Here, pick one. All right, I got this one. All right, I got that one.
and and,
That was
and
it.
while and while at the breakfast table with the hot pocket on the plate with the fork and the knife,
Yeah.
staring at the wallpaper, then they would proceed to open the latest issue of Vanity Fair and read a couple of articles, and then they would go off on their day. Isn't
Well, I
that the
don't.
typical? Isn't
Well,
that the
I don't.
typical?
I don't know how you were raised, but
I said they.
yeah.
So
Oh, okay.
don't
I don't
add.
know what. I don't know what neighborhood you lived in, but in my neighborhood, the only reason we washed our face and hands to go to dinner was because mom forced us to.
Who you calling you, pale face?
Yeah. I wasn't concerned. Bacteria, never heard of it. Yeah, I was just out chasing frogs and I had 4 of them in my hand at one point or another. It's time to eat a sandwich. Give me that.
and as,
Go wash your hands. Why? I'm going to go get dirty again.
and after the Pop Tart, you took the linen linen napkin and patted your
Dude,
mouth, and then as you exited, you took you you took a
I don't know
feather.
what fantasy land you're dealing with here. That's what your arm is for. I didn't even wear long sleeves. That was good enough. I'm 6. What do I care?
This is not high society. So
You're right. This is not high society. This is working class.
and then as you were about to exit your house for your your day job, you take the feather duster just because it was on the way
Oh my
through the
God.
hall, and then you would listen, and then you would dust the three vases you collected on your trip to Belize that one fine summer.
You and I were raised completely different.
So that whole okay, so that whole thing that I just explained, um, that is the furthest from the average guy as possible, and then some. The typical thing is exactly that. You wipe your freaking mouth on your sleeve. What? What did he say?
Where on earth does his head go? In every direction at the same time.
So, so, well, but okay. So I had to. Well, I was being creative, but that is completely the opposite of what in general men are geared towards in the most natural,
Hmm.
not even thinking about it way.
Yeah.
It's all functional. Get it over with. Let's move on with this.
Hmm.
Um, that's what we see,
Yeah.
and you can't help that.
No.
It is what it is.
But it's also situational because when you're outside with your friends playing kickball, you don't care about dinner.
Mhm.
In fact, you get upset that mom called you into dinner. Oh man, I gotta go eat. All right, well, we'll still be out here. Okay, all right, wait for me. All right. And then you go outside, they're gone, of course, you know. So, man, why
When
do we
it's
have to have dinner? Oh.
when it's time for you to dress up for an event across
Hmm.
your life, here's the two options. Was it met with, yeah, and it's going to be a whole thing, and I'm going to focus on this and that as I get dressed, or was it, oh crap?
It, it depends on, it really did depend on what it was going to be, on what I was getting dressed up for. If we were going to, I'll give you, for instance, my grandparents, their 50th anniversary. Everybody dressed up nice because we knew there was going to be a family photo. There were like 300 people there. I didn't mind getting dressed up because I was going to get to go hang out with some cousins of mine that I hadn't seen in a few years.
In general,
So, you know, that situation, yeah. Getting dressed up to go to a wedding when you're 12, I just soon not be here. I don't even want to go to the wedding. Why I got to dress up, you know?
it's almost like you're bending your instinctual desire to not do any of that in order to accommodate the society at large around you, your loved ones and such. But if left to your own device or left to my own devices, I'd be wearing a woolly mammoth fur coat with a bat with some spikes on it, and just sitting in front of a fire in some cave,
Mm-hmm.
and feeling fulfilled.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
Because
but it didn't go that deep for me. For me, it was a case of I didn't want to get my butt whipped by my dad. So get your ass dressed and let's go. All right. You know, that was it. He didn't want to go either, but he knew he had to keep peace in the family.
well, there's that implied social
Hmm.
standard to be met, but the
Yeah.
natural course is
Oh, yeah.
ooga ooga.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why if you look around, the only time older men, and I'm guilty as hell of this, the only time older men get fully dressed is if they have to leave the house. Because if we don't have to leave the
Usually in a
house,
coffin.
if we don't have to leave the house, you're talking a t-shirt and pajama pants or sweatpants or something. You know, if I may have to go outside for some strange reason, so I got to make sure I'm covered. But other than that, who cares? If I want to wear one blue sock and one red sock, I'll do it. And I'll answer to nobody for it. I don't care. My feet are warm. You know, my feet don't
Yeah,
care what color they are. Why should I?
yeah.
But then again, I always buy gray socks, so it doesn't matter. So, but you get my point. I'm wearing a gray T-shirt and I'm wearing blue plaid pajama pants. Nobody cares. I sure don't. But if I'm going to stand up and be on camera, or if I've got to go out to the mailbox, I'll go into the bedroom and I'll throw on a pair of jeans, put my shoes and socks on, and go waddle my butt down the sidewalk, get the mail, come back. Then the jeans come off, the pajama pants go back on, and I go back to slouching about. You
Just
know,
keep this in mind, Mark.
mm-hmm.
During your next pedicure, the massage lotion cream color should match your shirt, and if you have a button-up one, your button-up one, and it has to be in the range so that it all matches.
The only thing I ever let anybody else work on other than doctors, the only other thing I let anybody else work on is getting a haircut. And even then, I'm pushing it because if I find a barber that cuts it the way I want it, I'm sticking with that barber.
I dislike thoroughly
Mm-hmm.
people touching my feet. Not in itself as a thought,
Mm-hmm.
but the sensation, and even worse, if it's
Oh,
cream, like a cream sort of thing, because that, like feeling cream, like cream or hand creams on this side of my hands, it gives me that heaves, those chills. The thought of like squishiness or softness between toes or fingers is something that I can't. I like it dry like sandpaper.
you mean to tell me you've never gone down to the day salon or the day spa and sat there reading your Vogue magazine with your feet in the tank full of fish, letting them chew all the dead skin off your feet? You've
I've never
never
done
done that?
that. Is that a
Oh,
thing?
come on. That's a thing. I don't know what they call it. There's a name for it. Fish exfoliation or what. But yeah, you put your feet down in a tank of fish and they come up and they chew all the dead skin off your feet. I don't know. People will pay huge amounts of money for strange things like that, man.
I have a story that I can't share live,
Okay, then don't.
but
Let's
it's so
leave it
good.
safe.
It's so the story is so freaking good that I can't do it because of censorship.
Yeah. Jamie says, I'm sure Portal Woodworks would love to give you a foot massage. Yeah, but a boot in the behind is not really a foot massage there, Jamie. So,
Only if Jamie Page was sitting in one of those Roman chairs with a toga,
mhm.
holding a harp with a little reef around his head, right, and reading off profound poetry in his natural accent. Now, if you can do that, Jamie Page, then the scenario that you just set up for us, we'll consider it.
Yeah,
And a photographer has to be there to take your picture that we can post all online.
he says deal.
Oh crap!
See, you made it too appealing, man.
I sh-
Now, on kind of a related subject, we're talking about dumbing people down and easily manipulated and what have you. Have you ever gone back and revisited a movie? I did this the other day. That at the time I thought it was really something great. I thought it was really cool, but either it just didn't age well, or at the time I didn't notice just how cheesy it was, which kind of put me off. Why did I think this was such a great movie? Have you ever had that?
yeah, yeah, but I can't think of one. I mean, the first one that popped into my head was Return of the Living Dead from the '80s.
Mm-hmm.
It's a zombie movie,
Yeah.
and it's just cheap thrills. But
Mm-hmm.
I like it's just cheap thrills. Like I've tried to sit through it
Mm-hmm.
l- within later.
Mm-hmm.
I can't sit through it.
With me, it happened with Red Dawn. I when that came out, I mean, and a lot of us just thought that was one of the most badass movies we had ever seen. You know, the high school kids up in the mountains fighting against the Russians, Wolverines. We thought that was cool as hell.
They were Cubans in there.
Yeah, somewhere it was the Cubans and the Russians, but but I saw it, a part of it, just a few days ago, and I couldn't believe just how easy it was to pick this damn movie apart and just find so many things that I thought were cringeworthy these days.
Yeah.
And it's just like, the premise is a good one, but the execution back then I thought was excellent. But now, and I'm not even talking about the effects. I'm talking about some of the acting, some of the plot holes that were in it, about how certain things were just accepted back then, as it was easier for me to accept holes in a story, you know, with just a cursory explanation.
But a movie is not supposed to be. A movie is basically like watching a the cliff notes
Mm-hmm.
of some. It's like reading
Right.
the cliff notes of a book. It's
Right.
not meant to portray as is necessarily, because if you did that, it would be impossible. It would be a
Yeah.
series.
It'd be about 18 hours long. I do understand that and I do get that. But even some of the, like, for instance, you'll have gaps where it's pretty apparent that a scene is missing. Something, this event, then this event, there had to be something in the middle. Or that there was something that happened there that caused this event. But then you have other scenes that just go way too long, where they didn't need to spend this much time watching somebody brood on a rock looking at the sunset. I mean, 3, 4 seconds, you get it. But 45 seconds, zoom out, zoom in, Patrick Swayze looking pensive, zoom back out to show the panorama that he's taking in. I mean, that could have been done like that. It didn't need to be as drawn out as it was. So I don't know. It's just, that is a movie I would like to see remade. Not because, again, not because of special effects, but because of the way it was directed, I think, and then the way it was edited.
Talking about movies now, something that I connected in my when moving pictures first started in the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
One of the first places, not the first place, but surely across the Americas, except for the United States, which it happened first. Movies, a team took their film reels around the world from France. They were from France.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know the whole history, but I read up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
maybe a few weeks ago, so I just remembered it. And they took their film cases and they went to Havana. And then they showed their premiere and this and that. And there's photos and advertisements of the event and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And just watching that, it was, or reading and seeing those things
Mm-hmm.
was curious, for me to look at, because you're talking about a time that prior to that there was none of it in
Mm-hmm.
terms of movies, and from then to where you're talking about
Mm-hmm.
in the 80s, let's say, with Red Dawn. Obviously, we know, because we've talked about this
Mm-hmm.
process before, but if you were to pull Red Dawn and like smack dab it in like 1900, let's say,
Uh-huh.
people, it would, if it
Oh
were to
yeah.
happen like today, we would probably have murals of Red, like, because it would be
Yeah.
so beyond mind blowing
Mm-hmm.
that they couldn't handle it back then, except
Yeah.
say this is like Star Wars on,
Yeah.
like for us, Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
So for you and I today in 2024,
Right.
looking back a long time ago now,
Mm-hmm.
80s. that is reasonable. That we
Yeah.
would see it not passe, but kind of passe.
But it's just the style that it was shot in. I think another director would have done something different with it, and certainly it was edited to me, probably not to the optimum. But then again, mass audiences back then, it was a different type of audience back then than it is now. Now we're a little bit more jaded because we have the CGI and what have you, and they don't have to build the Millennium Falcon. They can just have a CGI Millennium Falcon and
You
have
were
the actors in front of a green screen.
you were born in what year?
61.
So the year you were born, I'm calculating it now just for shock value. The year you were born, if you were to, if we were us now,
Mm-hmm.
were to go back the same amount from 1980,
Mm-hmm.
like let's say you in 1980 were to go back in time the same amount as us living today, you
Okay,
know,
so go back 62 years from 1980.
no, like for us,
Mm-hmm.
44 years ago was 1980.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to go back from when you were born that same 44 years,
Mm-hmm.
you'd be smack dab in 1917. So for you and I right now talking
Okay.
about, right, so like you and I right now talking about 1980,
Mm-hmm.
it's like going back to 1917. So a kid today,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about these things,
Mm-hmm.
where I can, you and I know Red Dawn, we can picture it. I
Mm-hmm.
can picture it watching it also on the VHSs and
Mm-hmm.
talking about it with my, like I was younger, of course, by a lot, but
Sure.
for a kid today, that's as if
Well, I'll give you an example. That would be the equivalent of me going back and watching Charlie Chaplin films of the 19 teens. You said 1917, right? That was the end of World War One. So that would be like me going back and watching the silent Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Fatty Arbuckle, those guys, which actually I did do. We had a library, local library. This is how different libraries were than they are today. We could actually check out 8 millimeter films, and I would go check out two Charlie Chaplin films and watch them on my 8 millimeter, project them, and the whole family would sit around. Oh man, that's funny. Look, the thing fell on his foot. What kind of, and then I'd just return them, pick a couple more up, and then one Saturday or one evening we just watched those instead of watching TV when there was nothing really on. So I can see, I get what you're saying. It's like going back and watching some of the old stuff back then. And yeah, a lot of it didn't age well. Some of it did age really well. But if I if I was pushed, I think they were maybe better at directing back then than they were for a lot of the mid 70s to about the early 90s, because they had limitations. They had to overcome those limitations. Heck, they couldn't even use dialogue. They had to throw up a blank card with text on it to convey a message. So, if anything, I think they were better at trying to convey the message and getting the story across to the viewer than a lot of the movies that were shot in our time.
yeah, I guess what I was going for was that somebody around today
Mm-hmm.
hearing us talk about this
Yeah.
would be the equivalent of us back in the day hearing people talk about the 1920s or 30s.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. It is. Absolutely.
And just that idea, because when I was hearing about or watching movies of the 1920s and 30s and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
it seemed like a universe apart.
Yeah. It is. It is a universal part. And that's what I mean when I say some things didn't age well.
2000 was 24 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
and it feels like yesterday, to be honest with you.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
almost feel like I'm still getting into the 2000s.
Yeah. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that sometimes because I hear kids are, oh, yeah, I was born in 2003. I'm like, what? Dude, I got clothes older than you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's like, wow, the way that works.
Hmm.
Um,
I
Anyways,
it's weird. This whole subject is weird. And I know we're narrow casting now, but that's okay because everybody's going to feel this way eventually. It is weird for me to talk to somebody. I'll give you an example. It is strange to me to talk to somebody who is Jamie Page's age. We are both adults and we talk to each other as adults. But I'm probably the same age, maybe a little older than his dad. And he's right around the same age as my daughter. But I can't, with him, I don't make that connect of he's about the same age as my kid that I make with my kid. You know what I mean?
Jamie Page is a few years younger than me. I forget exactly how, but not by a lot. Certainly not compared to you, from you to him, or you to me. Let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and that phenomenon that you described, I also experienced that. Not with
Mm-hmm.
just with Jamie Page. It's a shorter stretch, but I can't place Jamie Page on an age bracket, just like you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
in that same manner, regardless. And there's a lot of people like that, that you can't place them in some sort of age category like difference, because it seems there's something to be said about something to the effect of I'll say it, an old soul.
Yeah.
And now I don't want to say that that's the case like 100%, but there's something about that. So there's people that when you interact with them, that this concept of age just is not present. And then there's others that may be the same age as the person that you're focusing on or talking about,
Right.
where it's incredibly apparent for some reason. Now, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Now, Jamie said he's 41. Okay. My oldest daughter is 46. My youngest daughter is 44. So you're just slightly younger than my two kids. But I don't look at you as being, I just look at Jamie as just another guy. He's just a guy I talk to.
No, I don't.
It's less about him being 41. It's more about me coming to grips with the fact that I'm this old is what
Well,
it is.
so when I look at you or think of you in that
Mm-hmm.
in that way, what we're saying,
Mm-hmm.
I likewise, I don't. Yes, I know
Mm-hmm.
you're your age,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not something that it's not relatable. That
Mm-hmm.
what's relatable is our back and forths,
Yeah,
our
absolutely.
that's what's relatable. So what
Right.
happens there? Because I guess it depends on the availability of interaction between two
Mm-hmm.
people
Right.
that eliminates that you're saying. Because yes, you can encounter people.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to people that I see them, and I know that they're young,
Mm-hmm.
but I'll talk to them like, let's say, like you and I talk,
Mm-hmm.
but then I'll see a glaze on their face, and
Mm-hmm.
then I'll pull back.
Yeah,
And I know
you have to.
you have to, because you're there's no way that bridge will be. um so I pull back, but I realize it after an interaction
Mm-hmm.
that the flow, they're not there, and it's due to age.
Well, and they can't relate to what you're talking about. I had a discussion with someone, an online discussion with someone a couple of weeks ago about I hate it when old people talk about how rough it was for them too. Look at us. We're making this much money a year. The average price of a home is this, and we have this and we have that. And I'm like, look, it's not that we're saying you have it better off. I can I can only speak for myself. I'm commiserating because yeah, the average price of a home when I was your age was about $100,000. But you have to remember, I was bringing home less than $100 a week. Yeah, my rent was $125 a month. But you got to remember, I had to save up one third of each paycheck to be able to pay that rent, you know? So when you say to me back at that time, $100,000, you might as well be saying 10 million because I had as much hope of owning a home when I was in my 20s as you do now. I bought my first home when I was 45. So I'm commiserating. I'm not saying you've got it easier. I'm not saying you've got it harder. I'm saying I feel you. I know exactly what you're going through, you know?
I don't know how to read this properly. That you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna read it off as it's said
Mm-hmm.
in terms of housing
Yeah.
costs. Housing priced at 100,000 in 1967
Mm-hmm.
is
Oh,
equivalent to 1,063,188.41
okay. Okay.
in 2024. And it says, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, prices for housing are 966.19 higher in 2024 versus 1967
Okay.
between 19 so no, let me just finish reading the thing so that you
Okay.
know the bit of it. Between 67 and 24,
Hmm.
housing experienced an average inflation rate of 4.24 per year
Right. That's about right. That's about average.
compared to the overall inflation rate of 3.98 during
Right.
the same period. Okay, so it's 4.24.
Right. Now, take a look at what it was in 1986. I was 25 years old.
I don't know. It says here.
It doesn't have anything for 1986.
No, I
Okay.
it
All
says
right.
1980 medium house was 63,700.
Okay. Okay.
And it says overall inflation increase in 2022 for this instance. So they're saying there's a problem with the way they're. I mean, at least I'd have to. I'm not an expert in this
Hmm.
by any stretch, but they're showing a graph with numbers or
Hmm.
percentages
Yeah.
that I'm not quite getting here.
Well, it's going to trend upwards and kind of bounce around a little bit, but the increase you said is about 4.34% per year.
That's what the
Yeah.
the government's thing says.
Yeah, and that's about ever. The target is 5% or less, but that's going to be the appreciation of the value of property. Is they try to stabilize it to less than 5% per year. So
So it's
you
within the
know,
margin.
yeah. So what's different is the only thing that's different is the numbers. You know,
Yeah,
so
but it doesn't.
it's real easy to say, well, the average price of a home was only $100,000. Yeah, but when you're bringing home $93 a week, it might as well be a million. I had no hope of buying a house.
No, no, no. I get all that,
Hmm.
and just looking at it like that without considering inflation and
Right,
comparable,
right.
it's going to look astronomical. However, maybe it's because of the local thing here
Hmm.
in Miami. all I hear about across the country is something that we didn't hear about 5, 6 years ago at to this. See, the problem is this: the media inputs concepts,
Mm-hmm.
and we are informed by those concepts, and more often than not, by a lot, accept it as the trend that they're suggesting.
Yeah.
In other words,
Yeah. And that's part of that presentation and manipulation.
see,
Because they'll pick something and they'll say, well, young people today, young adults have have less hope about the ability to afford their own home. When you could have taken that headline right there and placed it in any year back to the beginnings of this country, because young people in their teens, 20s, and up to maybe their mid 30s, depending upon their career path, they have very little hope of owning their own home. Like I said, I bought my first house when I was 45 years old. I was not in a position to do so.
it's also something to be said about
Mm-hmm.
if you look at a home price now
Mm-hmm.
and on average,
Mm-hmm.
in terms of us now here,
Mm-hmm.
and you look back 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, you could fool yourself to say, damn, if I would have gotten it then, look how much cheaper it was. And it was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, wait a second. Income hasn't gone up necessarily that I'm aware of in that time period too. There's something going on there where there is a legitimate thing to be said where income is,
Um,
there's something there though.
all markets are different. And if you live in a high cost of living area where you got a lot of people and not a lot of houses, they're going to be worth more money. If you've got a relatively small population and a lot of homes, you're going to find rents really cheap. I would venture to say there's no way I could afford to rent a place in Miami, but I'm fine right here. You know, I could rent a place here. If this house burned down and while the insurance company was doing their thing and I had to go rent a house, I could do it here. But I wouldn't be able to do it in Miami because there's no way I would be able to afford it. You're in a high cost of living area. And everything is relative. That's why so many people are heading out for the suburbs because it is cheaper. You know, around here, the median price of a home, meaning half are higher and half are lower, the median price of a home is $370,000. But you don't have to go far to get over half a million. You go north or you go south of me, you're over $500,000. So yeah, that's expensive, but it's not as expensive as some of the other places that I could move to. So everything is relative.
Yeah,
And it's weird to hear me to hear other people talk about they could still buy houses for 50, 60, $70,000 because that's unheard of here. You know, mobile homes in trailer parks are going for that much here. So to buy a house on a little bit of land for $100,000, that's unheard of here because there's too many people that want it, and that jacks the price up. So,
yeah, it's
but
hard sitting here.
but
Go
but my
ahead.
point in all of this was, but like you were talking about how you're talking to somebody of a younger age, and pretty soon their eyes just glaze over. It is hard to make those points without sounding like you're lecturing, and I really try hard not to do that. You know, because I don't want to be lectured to. So what makes me think that somebody else wants to be lectured to? So I try to present it in such a way where it's like I can commiserate with you, but that's about all I can do because I face the same battles that you did. No, I didn't have all of the other things that you have to think about now because society has changed.
You know what would help a person starting today is to as early as possible to choose a fluid gender surname. Gender,
Well,
because that
no,
contributes to that
what
is
would
a just a tip.
what would help them is to teach them the value of money and teach them the value of their labor. So, people put and it's the opposite of the way it was probably about the time I was getting out of high school and job hunting and what have you. I was willing to work for a lower wage just to have a job because I had mouths to feed. So people are less likely to accept as they see it, a low status position, you know, where I didn't care. I didn't care if I was packing pears or cleaning up a fire job. I didn't care about that. I just needed that paycheck at the end of the week, you know. Whereas now, I mean, you see videos about man on the street interviews, and they'll ask people, and they'll say, "You have your choice. It's a 1 year contract. You have to do this for a year. Would you rather take a non paying, high status internship with no pay, no benefits, 1 year contract, no promise of renewal, and no promise of hiring on for a job? Or would you work in the sewers for that same year for $100,000? Overwhelmingly, the men said they'd work in the sewers, and the women said they'd take that internship. So I think there was one woman who said she would work in the sewers for that 100K. And I don't think there was a single man that would take that high status internship and work for a year for free.
Maybe the thick mustache protected her from the odor.
I mean, I don't know, but you see a lot of that going on. You see a lot of, I won't take that job because that's beneath my level of dignity. you know. Well, back in the day, if you were to tell me that I was going to be making that much of above minimum wage working at McDonald's, I'd have been a I'd have been a burger flopping son of a gun. Because, you know, it was a paycheck. And no, that's not a career. The French fry basket is not a career. It's
It
a
can be.
stepping stone to take you further.
Well, you could climb the ladders of
Exactly.
you can climb the ladders to the roof to clean out the bird's nest.
Yeah. Yeah. You're working your way to the top. Here's your ladder. Get up there and clean that bird's nest out of that exhaust stack.
I love it.
Hurry up. We got Big Macs to fry.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Oh man, I well, I'm not gonna go there because I worked at a McDonald's. I was 15, and
Yeah.
I had to fight for that job.
Yeah. And here's the sad part, the guys you beat weren't good enough. Think about that. The other guys who interviewed for that job weren't good enough.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And
Well,
dude,
I was a
no,
dishwasher in a Mexican restaurant. The guys I beat weren't good enough, you know?
we don't know if you can trust you with that washing detergent and
Yeah.
we don't know if
Yeah,
you
but
can do
you
that.
don't get to do knives until you're through with your probationary period.
Hey, dude, but honestly, with that said, um, I I drive. I used to love burgers. I still
Mm,
do,
yeah.
but when they're warm, they're done
Hmm.
right. And
Hmm.
since I've gotten bad experiences back to back,
Yeah.
I look at the Burger Kings and McDonald's. Don't bother with them.
Yeah. Well, our tastes have changed too as we've matured. That is a physiological thing. When you're young, and I don't remember which research paper I was reading about this. It was done through Department of Agriculture. I want to say Illinois, the state of Illinois, their Department of Agriculture. They got a bunch of, they basically did a, cohort study, took a bunch of different studies and put all this together. Kids, when they're young, they don't want to eat their vegetables. You heard that cliche.
I didn't
Kids
like.
won't eat vegetables. It is actually a physiological thing, and anthropologists think that it has to do something in our evolutionary system. They actually taste bitter, and that's to keep kids from eating things that are potentially poisonous. So the vegetable thing, it's very bitter to them, but they'll eat a carrot because carrots have a bunch of sugar in it. And they'll eat corn because corn has a bunch of sugar in it. They're naturally sweet. But they don't want the green stuff. They don't want broccoli. But as we mature and we, get older, our bodies mature a little bit more, and suddenly broccoli ain't that bad. And then you get to my age where I just love cabbage and Brussels sprouts and things like that. But when I was younger, I couldn't be bothered. No, I don't. Give me a carrot. I can trust a carrot.
Yeah,
So,
my
but
grandmother used to keep fruits in a bowl,
mhm.
and like, and she said, "Here, have one." And I'd look at it, I'm like, oh. And she said, "This is good for you. It has fiber." And like, it would be oranges and bananas and this and that. She's here, and I always, be, oh, Grandma, no, it's good for you. And I could not. I wanted the frickin' grease and all the goodies.
Yeah, yeah. But even then, I see. I kind of considered that kind of thing a treat. I loved oranges and tangerines. Oranges, tangerines, and for some reason plums were always my favorite fruits.
Did you ever?
But if it was a choice between a pear, an apple, or a banana, give me the banana.
Did you ever? Or wait, well, did you ever? And if you did, this is how I have to formulate questions now because I don't want to be robbed of the opportunity to lay it out. Did, if you ever, and if you did, what was the first time that you had, and what was your reaction when you had a grapefruit?
When I was young, I didn't like it. My grandmother, now grapefruits look beautiful. They do. They look lovely. Slice it open. Oh, it's all pink on the inside and it looks like a big orange.
Mhm.
Nastiest tasting thing that God ever created. What was he thinking? He must have had a bad day that day. Moved forward into my 30s and I loved them.
Mhm.
You know, I'm
Mhm.
still not a huge fan of grapefruit juice, but I'll drink it. I
There's
don't make a
something. There's something
I don't make a special
vitamin.
trip to get it.
Yeah, but there's something about it when you do have it that, or when I have had it that says you did the right thing drinking the Seagull away. There's something that feels like there. This
I
feels like my body. There's something that informs me of that.
Have you ever had grapefruit sections packed in syrup in the jars? You see them at the produce section
I
sometimes.
have, but I never bothered with them.
I love that. Oh man, I love those. That's my favorite way to eat grapefruit.
Yeah, because it's got all that damn sugar.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the bitterness that a fresh grapefruit has.
You could put
You
a piece of bark
know.
in freaking floating in syrup, and it would be um
Eh, it depends on the
grapefruit.
syrup. The grapefruit packed in the jars is in a light syrup. It's not super heavy.
No,
Most canned fruit in a tin can,
it's that
it has a
water.
thicker soup. Has a
Oh,
thicker syrup than the grapefruit you find in the
okay.
jars.
Well, so grapefruit
Hmm.
grew in this big tree out from my
Hmm.
outside my grandmother's home,
Hmm.
and we just pick them.
Hmm.
And I tried it, and I thought the first time I tried it, and I thought to myself, this has to be poison. I am
Yeah.
convinced that this is poison.
Hmm. And our bodies are made that way to keep us from, eating something that we shouldn't be eating. Now, my next door neighbor's plum tree. the branches that hung over our fence, man, my dad didn't know I knew how to operate a ladder until we moved into that place because I was all up in that tree getting plums. That's for some reason that's one of my favorite fruits, and I couldn't explain why.
If fruits don't come in a bag, I'm suspicious. They have to come in a
Ah,
plastic bag.
just
Then
wash it. Just wash it. That's all you got to do. Just wash your produce. Wash your produce. You hear about all these outbreaks of this and that and the other. Wash your produce. So half of it's not in the produce, it's on the produce.
well,
So,
so grapefruit. Okay, fair enough.
um, but yeah, oranges, tangerines, um, two of my absolute favorites. And I mean the nice orange navel oranges. Don't give me them sour Valencias. Give me one of them navel oranges, the sweet ones. And it was really cool if there was another little orange growing in the bottom of it.
Have you ever eaten a grasshopper taco before?
No, no.
Would you ever?
If that was all there was and I was starving to death, sure. If I'm on a desert island and somehow found a way to make tortillas, I mean, you got to
Okay,
eat.
fine. Leave the tortilla just to grab.
Mhm. I mean, meat's meat, man's got to eat. So you do what you have to survive.
But what if those little leg antennas get stuck in? See, that's what I don't like that at
Yeah,
all.
well, I don't really necessarily relish it either. I would probably pick those off before I, fried them up or roasted them over a fire with a stick. You know,
Have you ever had cactus? Like I've seen people.
I've had candied cactus, but I've not had oh God, what's it called? Linda's, if she was listening, she'd be shouting it at me. They take the paddles, remove all the spines, they boil it, and then they put it in a brine. And I can't remember what the devil it's called. It's they do it a lot in Mexico and in Arizona and New Mexico. Um, oh my God, I can't remember what it's called,
Cactus stew.
but it's canned. It's kind of like artichoke hearts. It's kind of like canned artichokes, that kind of a thing. And I can't remember what it's called, but um, the Mexico, they make candies out of various things. They make candies out of sweet potato. They make candies out of cactus, mango, uh, lots of different fruits that I wasn't used to up in the up here in the Pacific Northwest. Get down to California, and it's like, yeah, you want to try some melon candy? Yeah, sure. And man, it was good. It was like kind of half dehydrated, but candied. So it had sugar all over it, of course, and everything. You take
Re,
a bite of
re,
it. God, this is good.
pureed, refried grasshopper.
Yeah, if you got to get there, you got to get there. Now, Jim is talking about prickly pear cactus. Um, I've not had those, but this was actually the paddles, the leaves. But yeah, there is a prickly pear. There's also what they call cactus apples, and you'll see they've got the big paddles with the spines all over it. It looks like a flower up on top. At the base of that flower, there's a fruit that's yellow, and they call those cactus apples. And prickly pear is similar, but it's a different color. No, I've never had them. I've never been in an area where they were uh, sold in stores, and I've never been in an area where I could go out and pick them. Now, up here, we go out, we got blackberries wild all over the place. In fact, living here is a constant fight to keep the blackberries from invading your yard because they will and they'll take over. We've lived in this house for, well, we moved in here in 2012, so we're going on 12 years. And one corner of there's a vacant lot behind us, and one corner, the blackberries will try to creep in. through and up and over and under the fence. And I'm out there with my product called Crossbow. It's an herbicide to kill it off. And it comes back in about 2 years, and I'm out there with it again. But
My great grandfather Felix Patricio Felix Escajedo Salmon took care of the lands, orchards, fruit groves, whatever they may have been, of Dr. Barrows
mhm,
back in the turn of the century. And halfway through, one day, he was in his 60s and apparently had was bad of hearing. Didn't hear the the trolley slash train, whatever electric, track thing that ran through the lands, and it struck him. It took both his legs,
mhm.
and it struck another man. Um, I have his I have his obituary from the newspaper.
Mhm.
This is my father's grandfather, and my
Right.
grandfather's father, and my great grandfather,
Yeah.
brother to Mateo Escajedo Salmon, who had died in 34. And this happened in 44, I want to say, or 40 something, 40, I believe 44. And one of the memories, 100 years later,
Mhm.
came from my cousin's mother, who I'm not related to, at least immediately,
Mhm.
because she married her father, which I am related to. He would be my cousin. We're talking about people that were born in the 30s.
Yeah.
Her mother, my cousin's mother, that's closer to our age, let's say,
Mhm.
my, my, my cousin is,
Mhm.
her mother remembered as a schoolgirl in that hamlet,
Mhm.
walking to school and always seeing my great grandfather there. Imagine this 100 years after, never hearing other than the story my grandfather would tell me, and my
Mhm.
father, slightly removed from that. I recently was told a story from direct witness
Mhm.
about my great grandfather,
Yeah.
and the story she said is that what she remembered is one, the day of the accident, but two, that in general, he would run kids off that were trying to steal fruits
Yeah.
from the trees of the land because that was part of his job to keep
Mhm.
the place from being sacked. But
Mhm.
kids would do what kids do and come and grab fruits and such.
Sure.
So this is a story handed to me from my cousin's mother. They're all from that same village,
Yep.
and I received it 100 freaking, well, not 100, but like since the 1940s till recently,
Mhm.
for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. You don't have to go that far back to know somebody or meet somebody who knew somebody else. We don't even think about things like that.
Yeah.
It's strange. And that, I mean, my grandmother, I've only seen pictures of my great great grandfather on either side of the family. But my grandmother knew him well, and would tell stories about him. And that's where I picked things up. Now, she could only relate what she knew about him, what she experienced herself, what she saw. But, that was more than I had just looking at a picture of this guy that I can't relate to, even though he's related to me, you know. So yeah, to have an aunt talk about your great grandfather that way is, yeah, that's something special, man.
It's incredible. And he rests in the plaque inside the pantheon. They call them pantheons.
Mm-hmm.
What they are structures, um, like little mausoleums,
Yeah. I was
but
going to say
tiny.
we'd call it a mausoleum. Okay.
They're like little houses,
Yeah.
and then the whole family's put in there.
Mhm.
He rests right below Mateo,
Mhm.
and opposite of him is his brother, my cousin's grandfather,
Mhm.
Pedro. Um, and I didn't know until I started doing all this
Mhm.
that I had so many cousins direct.
Yeah.
And I had photos that my grandparents kept.
Mhm.
Every now and then, my father would share a little tidbit, but nothing beyond a basic thing. I knew the stories of basic, we
Yeah.
but but in one of those photos was a picture of that mausoleum
Mhm.
that I would see and say, "Oh, I wonder what this is." It's a mausoleum, and I just kept it there. And then my cousin, 3, 4 years ago, took pictures of the interior, exterior, and I remember the photo, and I put them side by side. One taken in 1974 when my grandparents went to
Uh-huh.
visit the gravesite and whatnot,
Uh-huh.
and one of current. Everything lined
Mhm.
up in such a way
Yeah.
that it's like, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
For me, like it's something that has no, you can't put a price on it. Let's say,
Yeah. It's really cool. It's really cool. And getting that firsthand, getting those firsthand anecdotes, that's so special.
yeah,
That
it's
really is. And you don't really have to look far to find those people once you're able to make that connection, you
yeah.
know? So,
So there's that
yeah.
removal of time. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, nothing. I'm just,
Yeah, there's that removal of time, but
mhm.
it's not that far, like you're saying,
Yeah.
because there's
Well, you
always
figure that was the 1940s, right? That was about the time my parents were being born. My mom was born in 43. My dad was born in 44. So you don't have to go that far back. So it's, I don't know, man.
it's not that far. See, here's the thing. I'm literally speaking when I'm speaking to you
Hmm.
to the most exact representation
Hmm.
of all your forefathers. Now, this is humor me with this,
Hmm.
but you get what I'm saying already. But
Yeah, I
but
do.
I just want to say it out loud. I'm literally in conversation. Yes, specifically to Mark Lindsay,
Hmm.
of course. But in, I guess, let's call it a more, I don't even know what word you could use.
Well, I'm a conglomeration of all the people that I was raised by.
So that's basically where I'm going, but I wanted to use some sort of nice word to attach it instead of a, but I can't find the word.
Assemblage.
No, see, that's so mechanical. I was trying to be a little bit poetic here, but I couldn't get the word. Anyways, whatever. Exactly that you're saying. Let's stick to the,
Hmm. Yep.
mechanics of the thing.
I'm not a
No, I don't
poet
want
and
to
I
do
know
that.
it.
No, but I don't want to do the mechanic. I'm more. I don't want to say spiritual, but yes, there's some sort of trajectory thing. So not only am I speaking, trajectory is mechanical too. I can't get around. So
Well,
I'm also
it's
speaking
all
to.
math and mechanics. So,
I'm also speaking to the embodiment of 100 years and beyond long funneling of a series of individuals nested in you. Although you are your own representation, but you're also carrying along these other things that you may not be direct familiar with in terms of written out in a book, although you have that as well, but in terms of like a mannerism. Oh, so what I'm getting at is this. I've caught myself in the mirror doing a mannerism
mhm.
that my father would do. And there's a certain look in the eyes that I've seen in my face on the mirror that I saw from my father that I also saw from my grandfather. And I wonder how far back do
That goes.
certain things get yanked along the
Yeah.
long and winding road of time. In other words,
Yeah.
there's something there to that. So, you know, yeah.
In some ways yes, in some ways no. I mean, we're all individuals obviously, but we are products of the people that raised us. And I couldn't tell you what my dad was like when he was a little kid. His sister can tell me what she remembers, but she's only about 5 years older than me. She was a complete surprise. So, you know, it's like, oh, hey, now we have a daughter. What? Where'd that come from? You know where it came from. Anyway, um, so he was older than her. He was already in high school when she was born. So by the time she was awake and aware enough, he was already moved out of the married and moved out of the house. You know, um,
So you don't buy, so you don't, I'm not, I'm
well,
asking.
what I'm getting at is so I can't get any of the stories of what my father was like as a kid through any of my living relatives because there is nobody that was among his age group that knew him then who was
For
alive
you to be able to judge.
for me to be able to even talk to. So, yeah.
But so,
But yeah, there are certain mannerisms that he did that I find myself doing.
but here's the
So,
thing: is it that you learned it visually,
I
or does
couldn't
it
tell
get
you.
tagged, or does it, like, like, or does it get tagged along because it's embedded in ways
I don't
that if
know.
you were to be born without knowing any of your ancestors,
Mhm.
you would still reflect that. In other words,
Well,
well, go ahead.
I think boys growing up tend to try to mimic their dads. And I think girls growing up when they're little, we're talking about little, through their developmental years, tend to mimic mom because that's who they associate with. You know, mom was there when I was young, and I'm talking about 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old before I started going to school. Mom was the disciplinarian, dad was at work. And then when he got home, my dad was still young enough, he wanted to play with the cars and trucks with me. He thought that was fun to teach me how to tip the dump truck and how to use the little excavator, the little Tonka excavator, and lift it up and put the dirt in there. And he'd sit back and he'd watch me, and I'd be entertained for hours. You know, he would bring home a little slot car track. And this was my dad. He would, whenever something came out that he wanted to play with, he got it for us. One day a slot car track showed up. And my brother and I played with that for hours and hours and hours. And he would get down on the floor with us and play with it for a little bit. But then he'd get his fill and get back up in his chair. And my brother and I would just go at it for hours. Mom would be like, "You kids take that in the bedroom." Dad'd be like, "No, they're fine. They're fine. Come over, sit over here if you want to be closer to the TV." Things like that. One day I was 8 years old. All suddenly Hot Wheels showed up. I'd never heard of Hot Wheels in my life.
And that was a good day, I'll tell you what.
Then I had a track with like 5 cars. And oh, yeah, I was happier than heck. My brother didn't give a damn, but I sure did.
Steve said something that's kind of where I'm going
Hmm.
with. Um, he says
Then
now it's getting into the nature versus nurture argument, and
I,
so
to a
that's what I was.
point.
Well, that's what I was trying. So I get that you're
Hmm.
saying that. So, but
Well,
is
well,
there
go ahead.
is there anything? to things passed along when it comes to behavior
Well,
or
that's where I
likes
was going.
dislikes besides us observing our parents?
That's where I was going with that, because when a young kid growing up, I think boys tend to mimic their fathers and girls tend to mimic their mothers. But I think that kind of does a little bit of shift and enters into neutral territory as you get older. And then when you get into your teenage years, we all go through that rebellious thing where we don't want to go to school, or we want to dress different, or we don't want to, you don't want your mom buying your clothes anymore. You want to get your own clothes, and I want my own music and all that other good stuff. I guess about the time I was 10 or 11, my dad became the disciplinarian, and I wanted to copy him less and less. I didn't want to model myself after my dad. And I don't think I'm the only one that went through that. I think we all go through that to a certain point. So, how much of that was learned, I can't quantify. How much of that is, I don't know, predisposition due to genetics? I don't know. I don't
Do
like
you
all the same things that he liked. I can tell you that.
no no but
But
let's that question,
mhm.
that part of the question over how much it's due to genetics, this and that, do you believe, just on your belief, that when it comes to tastes or like well I'll reserve my thing, that when it comes to taste and or like even a facial, I don't want to call it a tick, but you get what I'm saying, like some
Yeah,
sort of
a mannerism of some form.
a mannerism of some form, do you yourself believe that there's some genetic passing along of certain things?
I think there anything's possible. I don't know enough to say yes or no, but I can't count the number of times somebody has said, "Oh, you look just like your father when you do that," or "Oh, you look just like your mother when you do that." Um, so there may be something to that, but whether it's something that is passed along genetically, I can't say, or is it something that I learned? I can't say. How much of it is me mimicking my father or my mother? I don't know.
So you have no idea either way.
No, I really don't know enough about it to say this is this and that is that. I've not studied this.
Well,
I definitely haven't gone as deep as you have. But there are a lot of differences. For instance, you talk about tastes. My father absolutely loved liver and onions, and I still despise it to this day. And no matter how hard I tried, because I kept trying to think, what am I missing? Mom and dad love this stuff. I can't stomach it. What am I missing here? And I never could.
so let
So,
me give you my thoughts on all this. As far as what's floating around out there that I've read on it, and what Steve said with the na-
nature versus nurture. Yeah.
nature versus nurture, we do know that we learn from seeing, observing, and
Oh, yeah.
cohabitating with our loved ones and family,
Hmm.
and we pick up the things that are cultural. So we do know that there's that, but we also know that people take their own roads, like the examples that you gave with the liver and onions.
Hmm.
So there's that too, as one example of many.
Hmm.
But then we also know that there's these things about family members and others saying, "Wow, you look just like your dad when you did that," or how
Yeah.
much you know. So genetically, there is two things. One that I have glanced at, but I haven't. But I'll just
Hmm.
mention it as a thing. They have done studies with twins where one, for whatever reason, one ended up in a foster home and the other one not.
Hmm.
and they end up sharing a lot
Yeah,
of similarities in terms of
yeah, I've heard
behavioral
of that.
this and that.
I've heard of that. I've heard stories and I've read stories about twins who were separated really, really young at infancy, and they meet later in life, and the similarities of their lives, what they like, what they don't like, just how they generally felt, always out of place, or something isn't right. I've read several stories about that, articles and what have you.
So there's something there with that. But
Mhm.
again, that's putting that to the side. They have percentages of probabilities when it comes to any number of things that they've studied in terms of what preferences people have or
Right.
behaviors. For sure, they have it with things like hair color, eye color,
Yeah, dominant
skin,
gene. That's what that is. Yeah.
skin height,
Hmm.
weight, prevalence.
Yeah.
It doesn't, like we've said many times, it doesn't mean that it's going to be, because
It's
all
not a
they're
guarantee.
right, because all they're doing is they're taking 300,000 people, or 300,000 people. In some studies they have up to 3,000,
Yeah.
which is considered highly reliable, because now you have a swath of society
Right.
that points to certain genes leaning people in one direction or the other. Um, they have a percentage gradient
Hmm.
that if you have whatever genes matching, your leaning is going to be towards having X, Y, and Z behavior,
Yeah.
or this or that. Depending on the study, it'll go up and down depending on how many people study. There is a thing called, I think it's called, well, I think it's called cilantro aversion or something like that,
Hmm.
where some people taste cilantro
Hmm.
and it's the most
It
disgustingly
tastes. Yeah,
bitter.
I've heard that. I've got a couple of relatives. They say to them it tastes like soap, like they're
Uh-huh.
biting into a bar of soap. And I have never had that. I've
So
never.
they've honed in on that.
Hmm.
The scientists have, where they figured out if people have these two letters
Hmm.
or these set of combination genes,
Hmm.
they're likely
Hmm.
to hate the heck out of cilantro.
Yeah.
Um, so okay, so with that said, to wrap up this thing and see what you say, and there's other things, but whatever.
Yeah.
Using that as an example, if it's true for cilantro, it is on a gradient.
Obviously.
I personally feel that it can be true. I feel that it can be true for all sorts of stuff in our behavior. In also, in other words, even though you may not have the exact same X, Y, and Z behavior that your old man would have, you have DNA coming from all your branches,
Right.
and maybe that difference that you don't share is a bit that was distributed from some in combination that produced the outcome that it did
Well,
for you not liking, I don't know, the color blue on Sundays or whatnot.
yeah. Well, this argument, they have been having this argument, this whole genetics versus environment argument for centuries. And I still to this day, I don't think we know. I don't think anybody can make a declarative statement. They can run numbers and they can point to certain things and they can say the evidence leans in this direction, but I don't think any scientist is in a position to say that they know for sure
They know what though?
that whether a person, the way a person is, who a person is, how they behave, how they act, their likes, their dislikes, their taste, their whatever, is a product of genetics or a product of the environment in which they were raised. Because arguments, strong arguments, can be made for both cases. And that's why studying twins is so specifically twins or triplets who are separated at birth. That's why studying them is such a huge thing to the scientific community because you have examples of two, three, sometimes four people who are genetically identical, but were raised in different environments. So studying them and comparing them to their natural parents, comparing their environments in which they grew up, they can get a better understanding for a lot of this. Now, that doesn't negate anything that you said, because there's a lot to what you said. But I don't know that it comes down to any one thing.
A
I
couple of
think it's
things.
a I think it's I think there are too many variables involved.
A couple of things. The twin studies
Mhm.
you lean as a reasonable thing due to the fact
Mhm.
that one twin is somewhere completely different,
Mhm.
not influenced by the actual birth
Right.
parents, and the other one somewhere else may be influenced by them. Or, but the point is that when the two come together, you now have something to compare with as far
Right.
as what kind of nurture occurred and how the similarities
Mhm.
fit together regardless of the fact that they were separated. Okay,
Right.
and you seem to that seems reasonable to you, and I agree that that's a reasonable thing to look at. But how less reasonable is it that they take whatever number of people, 300,000, to make it a highly reliable, and they study the genetics and see their behaviors under whatever category or their dislikes or things like that,
Mhm.
and they see that when people have this combination they prefer this, and when they have that
Well,
combination they don't.
well, and and
How
and
is
that
that? Go ahead.
and that gets back to the studying of the twins, because they can see that in the similarity. Obviously there are going to be some differences, but they can see that in the similarities, who twins who went their entire lives, and I'm not talking about 10, 12, 14 years. I'm talking about some of these twins don't meet until they're in their 50s or 60s, and
No,
they have
no,
lived completely totally different lives,
no,
but they are so similar. There has to be something to the genetics
yeah, okay, but
discussion.
the twins, which
Mhm.
I agreed with already, is a done deal. We
Right.
agreed.
And so it stands to reason that if that is the case with twins, it would be just as much the case with myself and my brother with 4 years difference, or myself and my cousin, who was my dad's brother's son or daughter. There may be just as many similarities between us as cousins, because we came from that same grandfather, is what I'm getting at. So genetics, uh, I don't think it's one over the other. I think that it's just a bunch of it together.
Right. So to finish off the thing, what they suggest, the people that study this,
Mhm.
and no one really says, they may argue on the percentages
Sure.
slightly, but as science goes, they end up leaning in one direction or the other, and then they give a percentage. But people will argue that percentage to
Yeah,
whatever degree.
sure.
So no one that I've seen argues only genetics,
Right. Well, you
and no
have.
one and nor one argues only as far as the people that do the genetics.
Mhm.
No one that I've seen or no study that I've seen um, eliminates
Right.
the what
Environment.
Steve said, the nurture and so they say there's a combination. So for instance, when it comes to intelligence, they're saying, and this they've highly studied, that upwards leaning towards 60% of people's intelligence comes in the box.
Well, I mean, there may be something to that, but I don't think anybody's in a position to say that that is definitely true. That's like I say. I mean,
No,
you can
what
take somebody who is intelligent and physically capable, but if they're not taught, they're no smarter than anybody else.
That's not true. Let me explain the situation. There's room for that you're saying, and it's included in the actual
Mm-hmm.
explanation. Like, so that is included. But here's the thing. What they're saying is, or the I guess the best way I could say, but it could be, is that if you have these set of genetic
Mm-hmm.
contributions, which can be found across the population,
Mm-hmm.
it's not delegated to one person
Yeah,
of a particular
yeah,
category, let's say. So
I
let's
got it.
put that to the side. But it is a combination. And if those are met, like the person that's being, or the people that are being studied have these combinations, their prevalence. Now, mind you, I'll say it's specific. 300,000 plus people were studied to assess their intelligence
Mm-hmm.
and if they could find a repeated amount of matching genes, and if the genes matched the intelligence results, they said these genes, and the people opposite of that didn't have them with their test results and such and this and that,
Mm-hmm.
they're missing those genes, and it's not two genes.
Well, I understand,
It's
but
a mixed combination of
right.
situations of genes. So it's actually very convoluted because it comes from all different combinations and whatnot. They're saying that these people have the genes and they have this intelligence. These people do not. The person, like let's say I go and put my DNA test up in the thing to compare to that group of people,
Mm-hmm.
they don't know what my level of schooling is,
Right,
or my actual this or that. All they know is that, do I match that potential hair color, or that potential intelligence thing, or that potential aversion to cilantro or eye color and all this and that. And so then what they end up saying is the following, which includes with what you said. For intelligence, let's say it says it for all of it, but for intelligence, eye color and hair color and skin color, they've really honed in. But for intelligence, they say this only, and I'm paraphrasing now,
I know.
this only um, points to your genetic um, disposition for intelligence. It does not, and then it's for specific type of intelligence. Remember, the
Yeah.
intelligence needs a definition.
Yes.
It does not. It does not inform of any us of any formal education that one may attain on their own. In other words, you're studying on your own, they can address, and that informs how much you would actually know or not, which is what you were saying.
Right.
But you have this potential, and that's what they're addressing. What it actually ends up being, as far as your actual intelligence, they would not know that unless you
Right.
were part of that study to begin with. So they're just saying to the person receiving it, this is the potential according to the genetics, and this
Right.
is the degree of which that is a percentage,
Right.
but it does not mean, but your intelligence
And
depends on your what is it? Your studying and a formal
right. And
education.
that's where you get into the genetics versus environment.
Yeah,
Because if you were brought up in an environment that put no emphasis at all on education, like my great great grandfather, no, my great grandfather, he made it to sixth grade, and great grandfather said, "That's enough." Great great grandfather said, "That's enough. You can come work on the farm. You know how to read and write." So
hmm,
his potential was never really seen until he was out on his own and he could read and he could study and
yeah,
continue his education that way.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I'm saying I don't know that it's any one over the other. because you could have all the potential in the world, and if it's unused, it's useless. So
Yeah,
yes,
well,
there is the genetic argument, and I accept that. There is also the environmental argument, and I accept that. I don't think it's ever going to be satisfactorily settled on if it's one or the other that predicts the outcome.
no, but the problem in there. So yes, I'll say it this way: you can be, or you can have this genetic disposition
Mhm.
and grow up in a place where you're not afforded any education. You don't have the formal skills to or training to perform awesome things that you're capable of.
Right.
You're still capable of them, but since
Hmm.
you don't have the training education,
Hmm.
then basically it is what it is.
Yeah.
You don't have the fulfillment level appropriate for your potential,
Right.
and there's that. But the potential means that there's an innate intelligence, regardless of whether you're growing up in a village somewhere in rural Germany and have no access to a big library or this or that,
Hmm.
or you are in a big library, you still have that. Now, if you take that rural, bright person due to, let's say, those genetics, but he didn't have the formal education, you take him to the city, to his a peer that
Hmm.
was formally trained, the guy that's formally trained will be miles above the brilliant guy that wasn't,
Right.
but that does not change the fact of his innate intelligence. The farmer guy,
Well,
of his
yeah, and I
innate,
never discounted that. I agreed with that.
the rest of the bit that's missing is that the farmer guy was never given due to
Hmm.
whatever circumstance. So there's
Yeah.
all those things that play. Now, they say it's a 60% genetic. So 60 is above 50. They have like a 300,000 something. I think it's 300. There's a
Yeah.
big number, and that's just one of the studies. They really work at that because
Hmm.
it's something that people. Um, but you still have this 50 to 60 to 40. It's half and half, is
Yeah.
what they're suggesting.
Yeah.
So there's that, and it's the same with hair color and this and that. Like on my thing, they say you have dark hair color. They don't know where to place my hair color. They
Hmm.
place it in the, like, the middle would be middle, so it would be like a dirty blonde slash dirty brown, whatever you want it to
Mousy.
be. And I'm a quarter of the way, halfway down to completely jet black. My
Yeah.
hair's not jet black, but it sure is as close as you can get to it. They rough estimated it due to the genetics that I have,
Hmm.
and so that's kind of where it sits.
Hmm.
They don't know that Mark Lindsay is like blonde haired, but they're gonna give you leaning towards blonde hair a lot.
Right. Well, yeah,
Or
there's only so much that genetics can say because genetics, again, doesn't take environment into account. And when I say environment, I mean your formal education, your informal education. You can take, I mean, you see it every day in every classroom across the world. You can take two kids from the same family and put them in the same classrooms, and one of them is going to get better grades than the other. And that's just simply the, you know,
but that's not intelligence.
but that law of averages.
Okay,
So, no,
but
I understand that, but that also has to be factored in that environment and performance dictates outcome as well.
outcome. Okay, let me say this other bit too. Imagine two. We talked about two brilliant people, one in a university setting,
Hmm.
and the other one that didn't have the circumstances available to him,
Hmm.
but he had the potential innate due to genetics, to
Right.
whatever to
Well,
whatever number that is, because that is a thing. Okay, I already gave that thing, and this can be actually looked at like it is what it's studied. But that's one thing. Imagine the reverse of that. Imagine uh, for this a person that's in the farming community that does not have the genetic disposition or or potential in that respect under that category. So it's just like an average sort of roundabout
Hmm.
intelligence. This is not saying stupid. This is not saying just saying just regular.
Hmm.
And then you have another guy in a university setting that's got the same genetic thing, but he's in a university or in a schooling setting. So now he has the advantage of having access to that. And then you meet them both up to whatever degree, due to the access that the one guy had, there's a chance. See, because you don't know um, what in this scenario, to whatever degree his capacity and the things that he's informed, it stands to reason, although one can, that the guy with access had has more grab ability of different facts and
Hmm.
educational whatnot than the guy that didn't have access to that. So regardless of their equal intelligence level, just like the other ones, the smart ones, but their innate window is still the same. But the nurture side got the one over the hill, whereas the other one not. The other one could, but he didn't have that. So there is a thing called intelligence that's genetic, and it has its influence, just like hair has your influence or your ability to consume
And
minerals.
I never doubted that. I never said that I disagreed with any of that. What I'm saying is it doesn't account for 100% of it. That's all I was getting at.
No, no, and yeah, and nobody suggests that it accounts for 100%
Right.
of. And then there's life traumas.
Well, yeah, and it all depends on what do you consider intelligence. Because yeah, that kid from the farm would be lost bigger than hell in that library the first few months he was walking around, but the dude from the university probably doesn't know which end of the shovel to put in the ground. So how intelligent you are is kind of also depends on the topic at hand while you're having that discussion. If
Mm,
you've never been a brain surgeon, you and I are both would be lost in an operating theater. But you know various things that a doctor wouldn't have any clue about. That doesn't mean that either one of us is more intelligent than the other.
okay, I understand what you're saying. I
Mhm.
have issue with it because there's a problem with it.
Well, there's lots of problems with all of it,
Well,
but they're
well,
not going to be settled. That's why the debate lingers on.
well, no, it lingers on in a certain way, but not the way. Okay, the problem with the doctor thing is that so you and I, let's say, and I don't even know how to work because you went.
Okay, let's take it a different direction. Let's say an attorney would be just as lost in an operating theater as a doctor would be trying to defend a client in court. These are
Yeah,
both intelligent men.
yes, but
But if you took that attorney in with that brain surgeon into the operating theater, the doctor's probably thinking, what a dumbass. You don't pick it up by that end.
okay, let me
Meanwhile,
inject.
the attorney is saying, what a
Got it,
dumbass. You don't
got it,
object to that.
got it. Let me inject the problem.
Mhm.
Problem is that your definition of intelligence in this occasion is not is is not it. Why? Because the fact that a person can do a thing
Mhm.
under a category is not the intelligent part. Because like we've talked about, you can be a lawyer that's been schooled in so it doesn't stand that just because a person is innately intelligent that they come out of the box as a lawyer or as a there is
Right.
formal education. But the difference here is this: intelligence is not defined as he knows how to um, do mathematical equations or he knows how to speak 20 language. That's not what the measure of intelligence is. It after the fact it is a measure of intelligence. So if a person comes to you and speaks 20 languages, you can say, "Damn, this guy." has 20 languages at his disposal. He's got some brains about him, but he's got 20 languages because his genetics and his education inform him of such. But the end result is only pointing to something behind the hood, under the hood. And so the intelligence part that you see is a consequence of something that's innate in the person that shares
Well,
that shares that shares a balance with that nurture thing to even get them to learn the thing. So there's that. So that's the only thing that I would qualify that that the intelligence isn't the doctor.
they are both intelligent people, and that's what I was getting at. But when it's going to be based on how you measure intelligent, because we're all intelligent to a certain degree. That's what separates us from the other animals. That's survival of the species. The fact that we are able to survive shows a certain level of intelligence. And yeah, some people are more intelligent than others.
Yeah.
Some folks, it does come down to genetics. Other folks, but my point is, there are so many variables that nobody has settled on. Yes, this is the reason. This is the line. These genes say intelligence, and these genes say, "Oops, you can take cab 7." You know,
No,
that's
all they're saying is that people with these genes
are more predisposed to intelligence than the ones without.
at the end user, the
That's
people
what I'm getting at.
well no, let me at the end user, but the
Hmm.
people test. So like if you go and take a DNA test and you upload it to
Hmm.
do what's my hair color.
Yeah, I know, I
No,
get
but
that.
let me say it for the sake of everyone. And you go and do it, and the thing says you have this potential for, according to the
Hmm.
genetics, you have this potential for hair color,
Right.
and you see that your hair color is exactly the one that they said. Um, they do not know
Yeah, I know that.
that that's true on your end. Well, I'm saying it in general. They don't know that that's true on your end. They only know that X amount of people that they tested did have blonde
Mhm.
hair with those set of genes, and the people that didn't have those set of genes in those positions at that thing tended the other way. But you receiving the test is just saying, Mark, you may have blonde or green eyes or whatever the hell. And so the same thing with the intelligence thing and whatnot. So the people tested that had those genes, they do have that intelligence according to the
Okay.
test. But but you know that then comes in what you're saying, where there's all sorts of different. They're just saying the ability to
Mhm.
abstract and be able to solve certain, like the whole thing,
Yeah.
that these people do that. But they do include that you said. They said, listen, it's only in forms of a genetic predisposition to X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
It does not tell us of your actual X, Y, and Z, which in terms of intelligence, which is determined in great part by, and I'm paraphrasing the thing, but you can find it online,
Mhm.
um, by your formal education and upbringing and such. So they include both
Right.
um, nurture and so
As
they're
well, they have to. Yeah.
because they're aware
Hmm.
that we're not an isolated, unchangeable thing. We have all sorts of things involved in our thing. So yeah. Um, and the stupid thing that you said that, well, nobody's really stupid. Of course we're not, or unintelligent, or of course,
Hmm.
but they're gauging these things. It's
Sure.
uncomfortable also for a lot of people. Like, let's say you get a crappy result. Let's say
Hmm.
there's some people that'll get a crappy result. Um, it's just it's
Well,
one.
nobody wants to be told that they're not intelligent. Nobody. You know.
Yeah, no,
So when you get a result back to, oh man, I don't have those intelligence genes. Well, I'm smart, dude. It's your shift at the chicken farm. All right.
but it is true that there's other factors that
Oh yeah.
they would not be aware of. All they're
Mhm.
saying is that according to this that we have,
Mhm.
What makes it solid would be the amount of people tested and whatnot, in terms of this is what it looks like according to 300 people tested.
Mhm.
As long as they're telling the truth, like if they're lying, like let's say they're doing it to make like some weird thing.
Well,
Like,
you can cherry pick statistics and you can cherry pick results to give you any result you want.
yeah, but
So
this is not that though. This is not.
no.
This is not
Well,
that.
I
This is just,
understand that. I mean, 300,000 people is pretty big, but
yeah.
as compared to almost 8 billion people on the planet, it is a fraction, and that's why they continue to study. You know, I don't think they're ever going to be able to pinpoint it to one thing because I think there are too many variables. But
No, it's
yes,
not.
there's a lot to what you say.
No,
So
it's not one thing either. They know
well, I
that
know
already.
that. I know that. But I'm just saying that I don't think they're ever going to be able to pinpoint it to any one thing.
Well, I think that there's mystery to abound, but they they have a lot of things figured out that a lot of people don't think that they have figured out, dude.
All
And
right.
and something as simple as so, just going back to the beginning of it, which was how much do we inherit and this and that of ticks and this and that. Um, Beyond all that, it it's almost like when I feel beyond all that and the genetic side of it, maybe even on a spiritual side or a mystical side or whatnot, it's just a beyond side, maybe the untouchable, the dreamlike. Um, it's almost like when conversing with someone like yourself. Yes, it's you, but it's a history, and I don't know what parts maybe mirroring from the past in terms of, your ancestors, but there's something when I think about it like that, it's a little bit sort of in awe, because we are the inheritors of the past, even though we're our own people. Um, and I guess it ends up being something that every now and then I reflect. Sometimes with people's total strangers, when I look at them and I'm talking to them. You're talking to a human being that has a history, you know. So
Yep. Well, I don't go into it that deep. I don't. I don't. I'm. I try to deal with people one on one. I can't go into their history.
no, yeah, you get what I'm saying. That
I do get what you're
it's
saying,
a
but
little bit of
I don't.
spiritual in there as well.
Maybe I don't know. I've never thought of it in those terms, but I don't know. It's totally new concept to me because I've never thought about it in those terms. You know, I'm dealing with Eloy. I'm not dealing with his dad. I've never met your dad. Don't know him. I respect the hell out of him, but so I have no frame of reference to say how much of you is a reflection of your father, and I think that's that's pretty up in the air because I don't even know if you know.
No, 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 no. But there's an intuition that it could be wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but there's an intuition.
Well, you know, and that's what I was getting at, as especially as young kids. But we go through waves where dad walks on water, and then, God, dad, you're really a drag. And then you get into adulthood, and the older I get, the smarter my father was. It's like, that's what he was trying to say. Now I get it. Things of that nature. So there's, hills and valleys in there. But I think overall, in general, boys tend to emulate their fathers more than they would care to admit.
I
And
think so.
it can be in big ways or it can be in very little ways.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
I
think that,
remember one time I was leaning up against was over at my grandmother, my mom's mother's house, and I was leaning up against their fireplace, and um, my grandmother was sitting in her chair, My mom was down the hallway, and I'm looking straight down the hallway. She's down in the bathroom. She comes out of the bathroom and comes up the hallway, takes about 3 steps, and just stops. And then comes on through. And she says, I swear to God, that was your father standing there. What do you mean? She goes, the way you were leaning against the fireplace, the way you were holding your hands, the direction you were looking at. She says, I just saw your dad when we were dating. And I was like, oh, okay. You know, but that
What did you
happened,
what did you
not that particular situation, but that happened multiple times from various different people.
but what do you think about that though?
Coincidence. Just oh, really? Oh, okay.
Is that your
Well, that was my reaction then, but I've
but
never thought about
random
it since.
but random coincidence with no, well, you haven't thought of it since, but
But
I
now
don't
that you're
know, dude.
talking about it, it's bringing back, yeah, there have been quite a few times, and that was one of them that popped into my mind.
If I had to go to Las Vegas and put money,
Mm-hmm.
with all the things that we've said, I tr- I feel
Mm-hmm.
that I lean strongly. And again, I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm saying that maybe I'm completely bonkers, but it's what I feel.
Mm-hmm.
There is some informed stuff according to what we talked about just a little bit ago, but beyond that,
Mm-hmm.
like an inside thing, I feel, besides I'm talking to Mark Lynn,
I get it.
besides I'm talking to you as you, I feel that also, I'll say it like this, it's going to sound weird, corny. I'm talking to as well, in a broader sense, the representative, for lack of a better word, of your lines going back in time. Not that you are, but you get my point. I feel like there's some sort of, and now this is entering into this mystic thing. I get it, but
Yeah.
I truly have a
Well,
sense of that.
well, Steve says, I heard that a lot. My mom said she saw different mannerisms from my dad in me, and they were things I wouldn't have seen since I was so young when he died. And it's things like that, Steve, that bolsters my opinion that there is a lot to what Eloy's saying about genetics, because how would you have learned those things from your dad when he wasn't there to teach you? So, you know,
I won't take what you, so what you said is also not something. I think both things, like you said originally, are freaking included in this
mm-hmm,
situation.
mm-hmm,
Um,
they are.
because it's due to the fact that a human being is not just a one-off. Well, in a way, it's weird because, see, I don't want to, but in a way, you're Mark Lindsay, but genetically, you're Mark Lindsay only one. Your combination, even though you have the, you're a unique, period, we all are, even though we come from the people, because the mixture of everything that came to us is pretty freaking unique to it. But aside from that, there's too many factors involved also,
Mm-hmm,
such as the situation you said where, or Jim was mentioning something about new skills as well.
mm-hmm,
There's a lot of things interacting with each other,
mm-hmm.
and we don't know also, well, I don't know because I haven't read that, but I know that this occurs, but I haven't read it in the context of what we're talking about here. Certain things turn on and off as well. Like there's a switchboard going on, dude.
Oh
Like there's
yeah.
a lot of stuff going on. So we're a complicated
Well,
thing.
yeah.
So and one life trauma can shut down a whole freaking endeavor.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Have you ever met anybody that suffered a traumatic brain injury and their personality just shifted completely? We've met two in our lives. We've known two in our lives
Or
that they weren't the same person they were before that injury.
right, or a certain disease or a certain
Mhm.
hit. or a certain something. So there's a lot of things in the life of a human being and stuff. So, you know, this study of the genetics thing is doing a specific deal,
Yeah.
but outside of that specific deal it's doing, there's a world surrounding the life of
Mhm.
a human being that has its to and fro's and pros and
Yeah.
cons and back and forth. So let's not, I'm not trying to eliminate that. And at the end of the day, obviously, then for me and many, there's an intangible spiritual thing that neither here nor there for one person or the next, but it's all in it's all it's all the things that people conclusions that one gets to. So if I were to say like this what Steve said, and his mom saw that, I would lean towards what I've been saying. What you were saying as far as what if it's a coincidence to some degree, um, we can't also discard that because we have talked in the past about, you've mentioned it,
Well,
sometimes things appear to have a pattern
mhm.
but end up being like when we were talking about numbers and stuff one
Yeah,
time,
just coincidental.
right? So all those things have to also be considered. So in
Hmm.
fact, we have to be a balanced thing. We're just looking at one thing with one category. It
Hmm.
doesn't mean that
Well,
um,
not only that, but we all have biases as well because, standing there by my grandparents' fireplace, there's only so many ways you can stand. So the one time she said, "Wow, you look like your father when you were standing there," totally ignores all the times I didn't.
well,
It
it's
was
her
that one.
perception.
It's just, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at. That was her bias. She looked down the hall and had to do a little rascal's double take because I looked like my dad. But what about all those times that I didn't look like my dad? So
Yeah,
it's only the outlier that gets remembered, is what I'm getting at.
but that's on her. The fact that you are
Right.
your dad's, the fact that you are your dad's son
Hmm.
is irrefutable.
Well, yeah,
and
that's absolutely.
and the fact that he handed you down
Hmm.
um his genetic, I mean that's how we get
Right.
born, dude. So the fact that you have, although you didn't show me a picture that, well, he had brown hair but now you have blonde hair, well, that
Yeah,
may
his
be
hair was almost black. Yeah.
okay, well that may be a striking difference
Hmm.
externally because of the hair,
Hmm.
but there's more to it than just that. So
Oh yeah.
there's that you're, I would bet though, if I had to guess, that there's definitely something
Well, see,
there.
you get a lot more philosophical than I do. And maybe that I'm not discounting anything you say because I happen to agree with it.
I'm leaving it
But,
open slightly.
well, I have to leave it open because I don't know. I've not studied it to the point that you have for sure.
Well, no,
So,
the genetics thing, 50 to 60%, leaning towards 60. They're saying from their
mhm,
tests,
mhm.
over certain
And
things.
that's as it sits right now. They may find another 100,000 people that brings it down to 40 or bumps it up to 70. I mean, you know,
Anything is possible.
absolutely. That's why I'm saying I don't think I don't
Anything is possible.
I don't
Anything is possible.
I don't think there are certain things we're ever really going to know definitively for sure, 100%.
Anything is possible, Mark.
You know,
But but let's just say widening that window, it's totally possible, just like anything else. But as it stands right now, if you compare to everything that they do, they can guess hair, they can guess eyes.
sure.
They're in the direction. But can something like that I would not discount it as much as saying that you said, although that is definitely a possibility. Um, that's open possibility, but they know more than saying it just like that. They know more than,
Well,
and
obviously,
yeah,
obviously they do because this is something that I hadn't considered until we started talking about it right now. So they would have to know more than that, but that only stands to reason. but I don't discount any of it. I can't discount any of it because I just don't know.
I wonder. Well, you have pictures going way back,
Mm-hmm.
but how far back? I mean, could you imagine? There has to be if you if you if you had a picture of someone like back in the 1500s, which you
Mm-hmm.
and you saw their face, and they're just like you and stuff, like, or you just like them.
No, no, I could go back on my dad's side of the family. I can go back to my dad's dad, and I look nothing like him.
Well, I've seen you've shared them with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and those things change as you move along.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
You
I
know,
look nothing like my grandfather. I looked nothing like his father. I don't have any pictures of my great great grandfather, but I do have one portrait, one photo portrait of my great 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 grandfather, which I've showed you.
yeah.
And the only thing I share with him, and it's hard to say because it's a black and white photo, is my beard's white too.
Well, but you're not a carbon copy. You're a amalgamation of
Mm-hmm.
all your past ancestors, and in reality, you're an amalgamation of
Mm-hmm.
mostly your most recent 4 or 5
Yeah,
generations.
yeah. I don't
So,
look. I look more like my, and I've been told this my entire life. I look more like my mother than I do my father. I've been told that my whole life.
and your brother?
Same,
Oh wow.
same. His face is a bit rounder than mine, but other than that, you know, you look at the two of us together. Yeah, they're brothers.
Oh, for
But
real.
everybody has said, well, not everybody, but overwhelming. They say, "Oh yeah, you look like your mom. Oh yeah, you look like your mom." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I look like me." You know,
I don't
but
know if I for us, it's funny because I can tell you that from my vantage point, I think we all have similarities.
mhm,
I think I look like my grandfather more than my father, although I share with my. Then again, but I think we all freaking look the same. And I think my great grandfather looks like all of us, as my father and my grandfather when they were old.
mhm,
Like I can see the pattern,
mhm.
and it's just something that's there. Um,
Well,
Big noses. They have big noses. I didn't come out with a big nose.
mhm,
Um, my nose is like this, but we're
mhm,
supposed to have my grandfather, a huge nose. That
mhm.
was something like that we're supposed to have. So I usually um joke with my cousin. I said, "Do you think if I'd be more escajado if I did a surgery instead of reduction surgery?" And she cracks up saying, "Nobody does reduction." I said, "No, yeah, because I want to get closer to my ancestral roots." And so stuff like that.
Yeah. Well, you know.
All right. Well, I think that
Yeah, we need to
we
land a plane. It's going on 3 hours.
beat this one to death with a broomstick.
Hmm.
Um, are there any comments before we take off?
Um,
I don't know if there are. I'm just
nah,
looking.
nah.
Okay.
I think we've argued that to death, or not
Okay.
argued, but discussed to death.
No, yeah, argued,
Mm.
which is discussed, and not discussed as in disgust.
The tyranny of the language.
All right. All right. All right. So we go live every Tuesday at 9:30 Eastern, 6:30 Pacific Coast time. We also have a site over on Facebook, Trampled Underfoot Podcast on Facebook, and we have a website, trampledunderfootpodcast.com, and we're sponsored by.
Harneal Media. Look, I've been preaching this for we've been doing this for over 5 years now, and I've been preaching Harneal Media for 5 years. So I don't know what more I have to tell you, because you already know what I'm going to say. Steve is the man, the myth, the legend. He's the man who sponsors trampleunderfootpodcast.com. And he's the man who can put you on the web with your own website, with your own web store, at very reasonable, highly competitive prices, and he'll do it for you, not as part of some package offered by some corporation, but as Steve of Harneal Media. 100% personalized service. That's what I'm trying to say. He'll do as much or as little as you'd like, but you owe it to yourself to have a chat with him. Get on over there. There's a link in every video, every live stream on this channel to Harneal Media. That's HARNEAL media.com. Hit that contact us page, reach out and have a chat with Steve. You'll be glad you did. That's Harneal Media, HARNEAL media.com. Sponsor, TrampledUnderfootPodcast.com.
All right. You took me back to like a 60s radio late night, the way your tone went. I was transported into a
A
60s.
golden flashback to the summer of 69 before you were born. Remember, kids?
All it needed is there had a, remember back then they had a specific staticky. Some of the radio things had a certain little aura about them with behind the music.
Yeah, it was
That's all
called
it.
AM radio.
All right, guys. We hope you enjoyed the show. Um, we'll see you next week. Same bat channel. Be safe and do the things that you enjoy and love. And we'll catch you next time. Peace.
Have the week you deserve.